All right, guys. Welcome, welcome. We are back with Bitcoin Magazine Live's 20th episode. I'm excited to announce, we have Q joining us today. We've got CK, we've got Ansel Lindner of Fedwatch, which with special guest Dylan LeClair will be joining us today as well. Super excited to have Dylan on. We've also got Meet the Plebs after that with Casey Carrillo and Mark Maraia. So that's going to be exciting. Ooh, and before that, we also have Nolan coming on to do another episode of the Breakup, which I know you guys really enjoyed his discussing nuclear energy and some potential Bitcoin solutions there yesterday. So I'm excited to see what he's got up his sleeve today. We do not have, I can see people in the comments, we do not have Lex on the show today. Unfortunately, I would love to have a conversation with Lex, but I did want to talk about him because I think he's an interesting figure in and around the Bitcoin space. He does register on like Hive.one and social networking Bitcoin spaces. He has a lot of Bitcoin and crypto people on his show. I think I don't know, Q, do you know anything about Lex Fridman before we dig into this?
I was actually going to tell you I took his online MIT course last year for machine learning.
Oh, really?
I have.
What was that like?
Um, he's very, very intelligent. It's like, what was it? It was Coursera. It was one of those like during the mid-pandemic where they were just like letting all the Harvard professors and all the MIT professors just like post curriculums online and let you sign up virtually to sort of like take their course. And it was while I was going down the data science rabbit hole. Um, Very intelligent man, but also like very blunt and direct. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't one of those like, oh, I'm on a virtual chat with him and we're going back and forth. It's very much pre-recorded lessons and you do it at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is very much like he knows his stuff, and if you don't, you fall behind very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds accurate. I could see that. He does seem like a serious guy, but also just like I've listened to a ton of his podcasts. I'm a big fan of his show, to be honest. So I think he's a pretty like sensitive, like in a good way person, you know what I mean? And I think he has an interesting way of dealing with hate on Twitter and stuff like that from the Bitcoin community. I know he got a lot of like backlash last summer because Bitcoiners like I think like brought him on stage on Clubhouse and then just like cornered him and turned on him. But I mean, he's got a platform and a path to conversation for, I won't say anybody. I don't think his show is quite as broad in scope as Joe Rogan, but I've watched his show from the very beginning grow from like this very like narrowly minded like artificial intelligence sort of MIT centric podcast to having comedians Tim Dillon on, having all sorts Elon Musk, like all sorts of people from all different walks of life on there. Big grapplers. He's a big black belt in jujitsu. Um, yeah, and so it's interesting to me to watch this year as he has more and more kind of crypto focused people and Bitcoin adjacent people, I would say. Outside of Nick Carter, I don't know that he's had too many other Bitcoiners on his show. Have you ever watched the show, Q?
I actually haven't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I highly recommend it. I mean, they're awesome conversations, but yeah, I think for Lex, it's kind of frustrating to watch, and I think like this is a sentiment in the like broader Bitcoin community. It's kind of frustrating to watch at times because some of the people he's having on his show, and I won't name names, but you guys know we're pretty Bitcoin only. They're basically, having pump and dump, securities. Like they're promoting securities, they're making false claims about what their cryptocurrencies do. So that's kind of it's not so much an ethical issue, I don't think, to have them on the show, but then to give them a platform unchecked to talk about this product that they're delivering, ETH, for example, things, Solana, like whatever, all these other cryptos and shit coins, it gets a little dicey. I think kind of to experiment with that and do it right. I'm excited to announce we're gonna have a great debate next week, and we're gonna have BitBoy Crypto. Is it Crypto BitBoy or BitBoy Crypto? Which way is it?
I think it was
You
BitBoy
guys don't know?
Crypto.
Yeah.
BitBoy
It doesn't
Crypto.
matter. Crypto Boy is coming on the show, and he's gonna debate Alex Svetsky, who, if you guys know from Bitcoin Twitter, is like about as toxic maximalist as it gets. So I'm super excited for that. It'd be awesome to have Peter Schiff on there too. I could see you guys in the comments. But yeah, we're gonna start with bit crypto boy. just
BitBoy
talk
Crypto.
with him. Yeah,
We're
BitBoy
gonna
Crypto, and
get
we're
you to
gonna
get his name right before they come on.
yeah. Well, I mean, we know I'm gonna try to moderate this unbiasedly because I'm kind of interested in what he has to say, but it's a free for all over in crypto land, man, and I support their right to do it. But I'm not a fan, and I do really wish, and it totally frustrates me that people, people with huge platforms like Lex and Elon and Joe Rogan. I mean, it's not their job to educate people about Bitcoin. It's not for me to tell them what their job is, but it is frustrating to watch them get fundamentals completely wrong to just miss out on such an important technology for humankind. Like, who was up here in the comments? Eastside Tony says he's sending sats to Tanzania. I don't know if that's remittance, but I'm sure that happens too. And the ability to provide banks for people like all across the globe, um, with no trusted third parties is like a human. It changes the course of humanity, and the Lightning Network on top of that alters the course of Bitcoin. These are probably the most important technologies to be working on, and I would say far more important than the self-driving cars and whatever artificial intelligence they're trying to cook up. I mean, this is something to master. So
Challenge you on
I
the self-driving cars, not to interrupt you, but strictly
yeah,
speaking, as someone who lives in Los Angeles, we need
yeah.
self-driving cars because like 90% of you people on the roads should not be driving cars. I'd also
Huh.
just take a public transportation system in LA, but besides the point. Um,
I didn't notice much of a public transit system when I was there, but I was just like walking around. I mean, is it very, you guys don't have that many trains. You have like one train line, right?
it's like I think they have at this point now they have three, but the Olympics are going to be here in 2028, I believe, and
What do you mean
part of the
here? Not in Los Angeles.
in Los Angeles. The
Jesus
Olympics in
Christ.
2028 are going to be in Los Angeles, but part of the bid was that we had to build out a public transportation system. So, like for example, LAX is the only major airport that doesn't have a public transportation system to like get you to or from. You physically have to
LAX
drive.
is awful. Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You have to basically join a parade line to get in and out of LAX of like
I hate
black goobers.
LAX. It's the
Yeah.
bane of my existence, and yet I frequent there more often than most other places in the city.
um okay, well, cool. Well, before you guys get your ticket, I would not get your tickets to the Olympics because I don't know if LA is going to be standing by 2028, man. It's burning fast. But all jokes aside, like, you guys should actually prepare for one event this year at least, and that's the Bitcoin 2022 conference. It's coming April 6th through the 9th. Also, there's going to be events before that and after that are just there. We're calling it Bitcoin Week. There's going to be stuff going on in Miami, on Miami Beach, related to Bitcoin all week long. So I would really encourage you guys to go out and get your tickets. We have a week and a half remaining of our 21% discount offer, which is the biggest discount there is for these tickets. It's the biggest discount there's ever going to be for these tickets. And you only have a week and a half left. So I'm telling you, if you guys are even thinking about going to the conference, you need to get your tickets with the promo code YTMAG today. You need to do it today. We had a bunch of those promo codes trickle in last night and the last days, so I know a lot of you guys are paying attention to getting your tickets, but we just dropped a link in the comments. Check the description of the video, head to the conference page, and get your tickets. To answer June's question, any events in LA for Bitcoin. There's
Uh,
plenty, none sponsored by us right now, I don't think.
I was literally at a Bitcoin meetup on Saturday, June. Add me on Twitter, DM me, and I'll keep you in the loop on the next LA meetup type thing we do.
Cool, cool. Yeah, June. No, but do that. Meet Q, but also, just get your tickets for Miami, guys. You got to get out there. This is going to be the biggest opportunity if you've ever wanted to join the Bitcoin space. I think Q can talk a little more about that. I think you found a lot of Bitcoin opportunities at the last conference. Is that right?
Totally. I mean, I was a lowly pleb, genuinely just like trying to find a job in Bitcoin any way I could. Showed up at the conference wide-eyed and tried to meet as many people as I could. And I think it was 5 months after that I started working at Bitcoin Magazine, and here we are. You got to I'm a big believer in putting yourself in an environment that you want to be in. And especially if you're not already
Yeah.
working in Bitcoin, be surrounded by that environment, be in that energy, and it will forever change your perspective on what can be done with this. It genuinely will.
Yeah, and reach out to Bitcoiners, guys. I reached out to Stephanie Amos, cold email, probably over a year ago, and he gave me a job. I just offered to work for him for free doing remote miscellaneous tasks, and ended up like editing his books, editing the fiat standard, the Bitcoin standard. Now we're going to do principles of economics. And that's not really on me, but I will say, like, there's something to be said to just reaching out. The Bitcoin community is tiny. You have access to all of these people. Like, you can pretty much get a hold of anybody you need. So, you know, come to the Bitcoin conference and network, show your face, get to know some people. There's going to be, 35,000 plus people there, but you're going to have a lot of opportunities to mingle and get to know. You can come to pitch day, industry day, all the events before and after the conference. It should be great, guys. So again, just get your tickets now. It looks like we had Nolan join us, so we're about to switch over to his segment, which is new, called The Breakup. And it's just all the reasons why you should break up with your relationship with fiat and the Fed. Nolan's a good sovereign individual who's given us some great educational content. So we'll go to a short break, and then I'll be excited to have Nolan on in just a few minutes. All right, we are back. Just want to hand it off to Nolan to take it away. What are we talking about today, Nolan?
As Bitcoiners are always focused on new things, new ways of getting information, of course, Bitcoiners largely spread their own ideas through meetup culture. As a Bitcoiner, pre-Bitcoin, I was a teacher. Well, I was a lawyer for a little while and involved in all that stuff. But even in a life before that, I was a teacher. So I'm always interested in education markets. They're just a thing that I'm curious about. I was actually a teacher in South Korea for a couple of years. And while I was a teacher in South Korea, they have this really amazing, I'm not saying it's a system I would prescribe to people. There's a lot of work and a lot of schooling there, but it's a really neat blend of private education and public education. And the teachers are really the clients. And when I think of education markets, when I think of the follow the money, so I'll give a quick preface in the show again. On this show, we like to follow the money. It's about the relationships we have with money. It's not about trading dollars for Bitcoin, Bitcoin for dollars. We don't care. It's about trading the relationship we have with money, whether it's dollars, and the commercial relationships that come about because of those dollars. So what I'm doing today is there was a quote I'm going to get to in a second. It was released yesterday from, it was a tweet actually, pardon me, from the Michigan Democrat Party. Now, on this show, we do not get stuck in the false binaries of Republican, Democrat. We don't get caught up on Keynesian versus Austrian school. We're not here for that, right? That's a lot of detail and really complicated. And I'm never going to tell you that I understand inflation and what's going on with macroeconomics, because I don't think anyone on earth does, really. It's too complicated. And that's kind of what we're criticizing central bankers for. But what we can do, so I'm going to be talking about this quote from the Democrat Party, but don't worry, I've got plenty of time to pick on Republicans after. So we won't be caught between the false binary choices of Republican, Democrat. We're going to show this third rail, this third way, the Bitcoin way today. So education markets. I'm going to try and do this really simply. It's a follow the money analysis. What are the commercial relationships in education? So the reason I picked the Democrat tweet yesterday is because they said this. Here's the full quote. Not sure where this parent quote, parents should control what is taught in schools because they are our kids, end quote, is originating, but parents do have the option to choose to send their kids to a hand-selected private school at their own expense if this is what they desire. True, I wouldn't disagree with anything in that statement. The purpose of public education in a public school is not to teach kids only what parents want them to be taught. I can agree with that. It is to teach them what society needs them to know. I can even get down with that. A little less, but yeah, they're on solid ground still. It's the final line. And this is why I talk about commercial relationships. The final line, the client of the public school is not the parent, but the entire community, the public. Wait a second. The client is the entire community, the public. That's what they said. All right. Is that true? Can you agree with that statement? Let's follow the money. Let's see the commercial relationships that are involved in the public education system, and then I'll contrast it with something going on in America today. So if you're not American, let me try to adapt some of this content to you. First of all, I put local taxes here. In America, local taxes are really important for education, super important. If you're around the world and you remember that show, Beverly Hills 90210, 90210 was the zip code, right? That's what Beverly Hills was. That's why it was really important. If you remember sort of the storyline of that show, where you lived was important. The rest of, most people in the world, their state government or their federal government is largely responsible for education. America is a bit of a different country when it comes to that, local taxes. So for the context of what's going on here, that's important. And charter is a major American thing. It's not really around the world, but I'll explain that. So let's just look and definitely fact check me on this, right? But I think I have it right, and I think you'll all agree. The commercial relationships that we have for public schools start with local taxes. Right? They're the ones with the money. They get it from parents. Parents are involved at this point because they choose where they're going to live. As example of Beverly Hills 90210, they chose that zip code. So parents do have a huge role to play. And you always talk about parents when they're buying a house. Oh, it's a good school district. It's great. The kids can go to school. So a lot of the client side, when they say it's not the parents, well, parents do have a lot to do with funding when it comes to choosing houses, but it's a really difficult way to participate as a client. And I wouldn't even imagine most parents think of themselves as a education system client when they're buying their house, because there's a million other commercial considerations to take into account at that point. But nevertheless, we can at least identify that local taxes go to schools in the public school system, and then ostensibly the abilities of the school go to the children, but we don't pay children to go to school. So if we're just going to follow the money, let's just be completely plain and simple. The money goes from taxes to schools. Right? That's the end of it. I think we can all agree. I haven't mind read anyone. I'm not trying to fool you. That's the commercial relationship that's most important. So when the Michigan Democrat Party tweets that the community is the client, is that exactly true, right? We don't pay the community. The community in some way gets a benefit from children, of course, being educated, right? That's great for every community. But the real client here, right? The real client, the one the schools are trying to serve, is where they get their money from, right? If you're serving ice cream, it's the people who eat ice cream that are your customers. If you're a school and you get all your money from local taxes, well, those are the people you have to pay attention to. And I think with COVID, we've seen that more and more. The teachers union, for example, which negotiates collective bargaining agreements with the education system. We saw all the kinds of rules that came around with masking and when students would be open. And so in the end, we saw who the clients were. The school boards had to agree with the larger governments and entities paying for them, right? So that was pretty apparent throughout COVID and is still apparent today. But something happened. Something called charter schools, which were available in New York City and California and a few jurisdictions around the United States, have become much more popular after COVID. A fellow named Corey DeAngelis, if you don't follow him, you really should. Corey DeAngelis is a great guy on Twitter, pushing this almost single-handedly, the issue of school choice, they call it, charter schools. And what happens with charter schools is you've got taxes, a much wider base now, not necessarily local taxes, because they do come from a larger collection from state, sometimes federal. There's some federal involvement in this type of schooling, less now, but I believe there was at one point. What happens then is the parents, right, really become the client. The parents become the client. The students aren't the client in this situation either. The parents are the client, because the way charter works, for those of you who don't know, is think of it as a coupon. So say your child would get $20,000 for going to the public school system in Florida and a few other states in the United States now. You can actually get a coupon for that. Instead of the $20,000, you get what amounts to $20,000, which you can then shop and spend at a charter school. So it infuses market forces into the school decision process and really does make the parents the client, because their ability to shop and discern one product from another, in this case a school, it really comes down to their own discrimination, really, right? They want a good one, not that one. So you could send your kids to a yoga school, you can send your kids to a sports school, you can send your kids to an art school. A lot of these voucher schools, charter schools are based on these principles. So and what we've seen now in the United States, because of the COVID mandates and the loss of faith in the public school system and the confusion around masking and all these other things, what we've seen is almost 30 states in the American Federation, 50 states, right? 30 have now gone outside of the school union system, the federal teachers union system, which opposes charter schools greatly and advocates for only public. So what this has done is it's actually crippled the lobby against charter schools. And charter schools are really getting a lot of momentum now as a result. So you're seeing the American system start to blend between public and charter. So here's where things start to get really interesting when we follow the financial relationship. So in this case, there are still taxes. Parents are the ones giving them to the schools. The schools then transfer that money into cash and can pay themselves, right? So they get some form of licensing from a state entity to be able to turn that voucher or that coupon into cash to pay the school. Now, this all works, but I'm a major proponent of this second system here. I think charter schools really do work, but there's a problem with it. There is one problem with it, and it has a limit to its shelf life, if you will, and that's where the Bitcoin financial relationship really does come in. And I'll bring it back to those binaries and what I mentioned about Democrats and Republicans. So in the very black and white of education right now, in those false dichotomies, those false choices, Democrats are certainly for a public school system. I mean, that I think we can say pretty safely and not generalize too much. It is very much funded by teachers unions. There's a lot of overlap there between these groups, right? Like it or not, it's a fact. Now, here's where things, for me anyway, started to change, and where you start to realize that you were stuck in a false dichotomy. And that's why we call this show The Breakup. It's about letting relationships go that you thought were real or important, and ideas that you had that you ascribed all kinds of meaning to, but maybe aren't really true and do keep you stuck in these false binaries. And that, with the spirit of MLK yesterday, I remember in the summer of 2020, when a lot of the protests were going on about systemic racism and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, where is it in America? I ended up seeing it very clearly when you really take an honest look at the education system. It certainly has a lot of inbuilt systemic racism, both in the public aspect. And then even I thought about it as you're doing the soul searching, I think a lot of people did in that time, in that summer of 2020, what I realized was a lot of those conservative ideas around charter schools, as much as I support them and as great as they are, focus quite a bit on parents being the clients. This red line that I have underlined here is to show who the client is. So I disagree with the Democrat Party statement in Michigan that the community is the client. It's not. The people who are giving the tax money to the school, they're the client, right? The administrators, the one collecting tax money, giving it to the schools. In the charter school system, it's an improvement. We've migrated the client to the parent, and they're discerning. But here's the trick. Here's where you get brainwashed from binary partisan politics. Is it really an option for everybody in the world, that we just have better parents who act more like clients and are better shoppers for school. It works for many people. It works for probably the majority. But there's a portion of the population it's not going to help them. And it's wishful thinking. And in fact, it's not empathetic, right? You're not really thinking about the people in your world. You're saying, well, here I can be right. It's a bit like the Austrian versus Keynesian school accounting thing, if that's how we're going to settle Bitcoin, by an accounting argument, right? Where our math is better than your math, therefore Bitcoin is great. It's not exactly that, right? So when you think about it, well, it's an easy solution. If everyone just has better parents, if parents don't get divorced, all our problems are solved. But that's not in the cards. It's not even close. There's a lot of kids who need a lot of help. And that's why when I look at what I do and what a lot of Bitcoiners are doing, and you're seeing this trend throughout the world, it's not just Bitcoiners, it's no school. I don't even call it homeschool. It's no school, right? It's no school. And if it's no school, what ends up happening is Bitcoiners like myself start seeing all children as clients, in the sense that they go to community places. And as a member of a community, you invest your time and your energy in making sure the places where the kids spend their time and spend their energy and learn their things are infused with all of your energy and your talent and your ability, right? So I mean, basketball groups and even Bitcoin, right? So leading Bitcoin meetups and involving yourself in your community. In that way, you're able to be the parent of all the kids out there who don't have parents who are going to be the discerning shoppers for them to take advantage of the charter school systems. We can't just relegate all kids to the system. And there's a few other things Bitcoiners can even do upstream of that. I think of credentialism instantly, right? So if we're going to get away from this education system, part of it has to do with saying, well, I'm not going to just take a kid from Harvard in this job right now because they have a fancy degree or whatever, right? You see a kid who dropped out of college and was mining Bitcoin and did a few other things, and now they have a really good writing skill. As a Bitcoiner, you got to favor that person, because downstream, we can't still have these credentialist institutions deciding who gets to do what job later in life. That's kind of one of those financial relationships we have to break. You don't see that on the back end of all this, right? When people go into buying houses and making real estate decisions, acting like a client for their kid when it comes to choosing their schools in a really convoluted and complicated way, buying a house, for God's sakes, right? It's a complicated way to participate in the school system. And then you see it, trickle down, and it changes. The client here is the parent, but there's still gaps, right? There's still gaps. And while a lot of kids without good parents can definitely make it to the charter school system, get a degree at college and be great, right? I foresee that happening. Once again, I am a proponent of the charter school system and do not want to put any obstacle in its way from being successful. But you've got to think one step later, right? We can't relegate all these people to a life where no one's going to pay attention to their education, because there is a whole swath of kids that are going to need people to educate them on things that are really important. And it can't be done as a low-level admin assistant learning how to sit still for 8 hours in a school, right? It has a lot to do with making sure the communities we live in are really healthy, and the parks are in good shape. That could even mean just fixing your local park. I mean, really, it doesn't take much more than that, but it does involve community engagement more than it ever has. You simply can't be an anonymous person and hope that everyone gets educated properly. Yesterday on the show, we were talking about financial relationships that go into energy and how important those are. And you've got to create a better energy matrix for everyone. And it's important for Bitcoiners, if we get that right, to not have Schadenfreude, right? To not enjoy other people's failure, right? This is kind of the same. There's things that threaten Bitcoin's survival and health that aren't technical. They're about the relationships and decisions we make. In the case of energy, right? We've got important decisions to make, and when it comes to education, involving yourself in your community, make sure we don't have a bunch of idiots around, idiots, right? That our kids aren't living amidst people who were educated without anyone who gave a damn. And so that's really, I think, the message that I want to take today and share with you, that we have to break up with certain relationships, credentialism in particular, and start breaking apart some of the commercial relationships that go into a school system that ain't working for anybody. and help support other commercial relationships that'll get us a little further to where we want to go. But importantly, have, I think, a system, right? Bitcoiners have a system where we can see a world where there's no school because we don't require credentialism in order to get ahead when you're an adult, the upstream effect, and that our communities are healthy and that the people living in them can be raised by everyone who's got time and energy and effort. So that's today's episode. You can find more of the content. Please follow me at CountBTC on Twitter. And sometimes I'll be uploading these on YouTube as well, but that's my show for today.
Awesome. Great to have you, Nolan. Thank you. This is a great day two, the debut of your show. And I think everybody's really enjoying it.
I hope so, guys. I hope it makes sense. It's about relationships. It's about seeing where the money goes, right? Follow the money, but we're not mega investigators here. It's just follow the money. Who is dealing with who, and what's the output, right? Yesterday we talked about the output of people's desire to solve global warming and then choosing the right energy matrix. And we said the commercial relationships just didn't really get us there. We have an oil market for dollars that's doing fine. The ESG market, shaky, not on demand. And certain forces have put an end to any ability to have a relationship between money and nuclear power that would allow us to all benefit and solve some of the problems we have. And today, it really is about the commercial relationships in school. And really, the important effect is this red line here. What you want to see is the client go from the person collecting taxes, insane, but that's what we built. It worked 50 years ago, I guess, but it sucks now. I mean, if you could buy a house wherever you want and they were all cheap, sure, it works fine, right? Then it's okay. If it's the 1950s again and someone pumping gas can buy a house on one income, great, right? Then the system's just fine. But nowadays, I mean, go buy a house in a nice school district and see what else you got, see what other problems you have to solve first to get there, right? They're not easy. So it really shows the client of the system going from taxes to parents. And then in the no school system, it literally is where the kids are having fun and showing up, right? If they're showing up there, we're going to fund it, right? If it keeps my kids playing with other Bitcoin kids and gives me time to chat Bitcoin with some other parents, I'll spend money on that every day, right? I'll spend money on that every day.
I've seen a lot of those like no school programs where they have, what is it? They pull together 6 families, will all chip in. They pay a teacher. The teacher's going to make a lot more than they would have ever made public or private school. Your kid is going to get much more hands-on. To be honest, that I think that's the solution that I'd like to see going forward.
Yeah, but for me, where it's important for Bitcoiners is that we recognize, so that it totally checks out for 60-70% of people, right?
Right.
You know, lots of parents pay close attention to their kids' education, but we can't. Bitcoin is a battle of the hearts and minds here. It really is. And when the last boss comes, when the confrontation between the forces at work in the world and Bitcoin have their head-on collision, it's my opinion that if we don't turn those hearts and minds, we're in for trouble, right? So it's not just to make a better world. It's self-preserving. You know.
Bitcoin is inevitable. Thanos said so.
There you go.
All right, great to have you on, Nolan. Looking forward to chatting with you tomorrow again.
Thanks a lot, Shane.
Yep. Take care.
Ciao.
Q, I'm interested in your education upbringing and where you think Bitcoin could have been plugged into that.
All right. I will preface this by saying, like, I was very fortunate and I grew up in a very privileged community and environment. I went to public school. However, like, I recognize that my public school system in the community I live in is on par with most people's private school education. So I recognize that. I remember like the conversations. So like to Nolan's point, like housing prices in the town that my parents live in are insane. It's Southern California, but then you have to like multiply that for being like in the good school district. And there's still like a private school that people will send their kids to. So you're still paying that property tax that goes towards the public school system. And then on top of that, you're paying a private school tuition too. So it's a very interesting community. I think as I've taken some time to like reflect on what I learned, I mean, I had some incredible teachers growing up. Shout out Miss Crady, shout out Miss Barton and Miss Batson. My junior year English and history teachers really were the first ones who like forced us, not just like recommended, not just like challenged us, but like genuinely forced us to write papers through like a lens of critical thinking. And it was super helpful. However, I also just still recognize ultimately our public school system just teaches you how to be an employee. I was really lucky. I had my senior year, I had this teacher, Professor Harley, who I think we had like weird schedules. So I would have him for 3 hours a day. And like he taught us how to invest in stocks. He like signed us up for I think it was Investopedia, whatever this platform that like let you just have like a fake $10,000, but you trade it reflected of the real stock
Paper
market.
trading.
Like, dude, we were doing that at 17 years old. Like that was incredible. I remember reaching out to him 2 years later and I was like, all right, I'm like working for a stockbroker and I have my own account now. Like, thank you for teaching me certain things because I look like the best intern out of everyone here. But again, like that's not everyone's public education experience. And I recognize that. And I think there's a lot that can be done. I would like to see, I think, a shift towards a lot more critical thinking being incorporated into the education. And I think there are, I'm going to say something that I know our producer, Chris, doesn't necessarily agree with. Him and I had a long conversation about this. I'm sure people in the chat are not going to love this. I don't know how you're going to feel about this, Alex.
So we call him Hot Take Q.
I believe that critical race theory absolutely should be taught in our public education system strictly on the basis that you are now ingraining and teaching people how to think critically. For the first time in the public education system, you are forcing students to learn about other perspectives, take it into account, and create judgments based on a multitude of perspectives, not just one. There's no system in our current public education forum that requires you to think critically. It's all just memorize a bunch of facts, memorize a bunch of numbers, and regurgitate it back to me. How well did you do that? Oh, you got an A, sick. You'll be a good employee. You got a C. You got some work to do.
I would I'd push back, but first I'd slow down. Like to tie this back to Bitcoin, I actually taught in a public school for 1 year. Yeah, I taught middle schoolers. And as far as I can tell, the whole thing is basically fucked because it's centrally planned. And, by the time these educational plans make it through like state legislation, whatever, it's handed down to the teachers. The teachers, by the time they get into the classroom, they don't even have a say in what they're teaching. There's really no hurdles in keeping teachers from teaching that are not qualified to do so. They're impossible to fire. I myself have no real background in education. I was able to find a good job. I mean, I was kept on staff as a teacher throughout COVID, despite having no teaching credentials. Like, it's just absurd. You know what I mean? The people that are teaching your kids. I did the best I could, but still, it's like, I agree with you though. There's no critical thinking skills required of students. I didn't have to display any. I went to school partly in Germany, and there it was kind of a shock, rather than multiple choice, tests or assignments that you could cheat on. You have what's called Klausuren, and you sit for hours and write essays. They give you questions, and you have to write essays in response to them. Everyone does, and if you can't hack it, if you can't think critically, digest the information you're given, organize your thoughts. If anyone's ever read my reading, that you'll know that I'm terrible at organizing my thoughts. And then spit it back out to them in a compelling argument. You're not going to make it, and they'll tell you early on. I had friends who, as early as 8th grade and sometimes before, they say, why don't you hang back a grade? Okay, you know what? We tried keeping you back a grade. Why don't you learn a skill? Because you're not really, you can't read. Like, you need to become, you need to learn a trade, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like, you don't want to do the work, you don't want to read and write and think critically, so you need to think maybe abstractly. Maybe you need to become a woodworker, maybe you need to do an apprenticeship with an architect, or carry out some other menial task. Like, there's different kinds of work for everybody, and I don't think our school system really accounts for that. I've been in 3-4 school systems growing up, and most of them, aside from the one in Germany, kind of expected you were going to become like an engineer or a doctor or something, and if you weren't up to that bar, they just forgot about you. I mean, you didn't just don't worry about it. The student to teacher ratio was out of control. I mean, the things we spent our day doing were absurd. I mean, just completely absurd. Even the food that kids are given to eat.
Oh,
And to bring this back to Bitcoin again, I think it's a huge problem. I think it's a central planning issue. I think these schools need to be broken up. I do not think we should like be paying taxes for this. If people only knew what their taxes were going to, they're going to Domino's Pizza so your kid can eat pizza every day for lunch. And then he comes out of lunch smooth brained for the rest of the day, carbohydrate filled, tired, hopped up on sugar and pop. Like, it's a mess. We're not doing any service to our kids by sending them to these schools. And I don't even have children. I just worked in one of the schools, and it was depressing, to be honest. I mean, I don't know what more to say. I didn't really address your critical race theory, but sorry.
No, I mean, I don't care. The chat is taking care of that, and I'm getting absolutely slaughtered, but I don't care. I think any Bitcoiner, every single Bitcoiner who thinks critically about economics should not be so fragile about the idea of introducing critical thinking to kids. And I'm not saying I want a 5-year-old to do it. So
right. Critical thinking.
Ask you a couple
can you
things.
Can you define critical race theory first before we get into this?
Sure. I mean, for me, it is genuinely the perspective and understanding of situations of different races, essentially, and specifically in this country, the effects of Black American slavery, and understanding the perspective not just of what happened, what was the end result, how did we get here, the uprisings, but genuinely like what was the perspective of Black people during these times? What were the conversations that Black America was having during that time? I'm making it very much focused on that right now, so you guys listening can really like understand and paint the picture and see the picture I'm trying to paint here. It's not about saying right or wrong. It's not. The things have happened. What it's about is, how do we learn other perspectives? How do we then quantify new information on old facts that we know and combine them to move forward? This, in a nutshell, is critical thinking. And if you are a Bitcoiner, you should always be in support of critical thinking. And as a result, you should theoretically support critical race theory, because you are teaching for the first time kids, whatever age you want to do it. I'm a big believer it should be in high school. I think it should be taught as part of your high school history curriculum. I'm very grateful that my US history AP teacher like specifically made a point to teach us not just the perspective of American history written by white men, but also written by Black America as well.
Do you think, I mean, did you go to a school where other races were ignored?
81% white people. I went to white America school. No.
I went to what I went. My school was 100% white people.
Fair.
Listen. I had one. There's one Black kid at my school. His name's Tristan Wirfs. He's in the NFL. This kid crushed it. There was one Latino girl at my school. She drove her car into the principal's house on accident. That's all I know about her, really. But that's it. Other than that, it was all white people. So my question is, and I'm just thinking, what would critical race theory bring to these white kids who are never going to leave their town? They're farmers. They're never going to leave these small Midwestern towns. They're never going to encounter real diversity. It serves no purpose for them, other than perhaps expanding their imagination and on some like theoretical grounds. But no, there's no practical need for it.
I challenge you in saying, especially to bring it back now to Bitcoin, where as we are watching society move towards an information age, and we will eventually be transacting almost entirely through a virtual or digital medium. even if you
Mhm.
have a labor intensive business like construction. My dad is a contractor and an architect. I know
Yeah.
Eastside Tony, you also have a construction business, I believe, but you are going to eventually be transacting more of your business inquiries virtually. And as a result, you're going to be able to expand your network beyond the local business. And as a
Yeah.
result, even though you are never going to physically see someone who doesn't look like you, it begins to put this idea and you are able to understand what a different culture is. You're able to understand why does someone, like, frankly, you're there is a disconnect, I think, between American business and international business. And if we want Bitcoin to succeed, Bitcoin is not going to be an American concept. Bitcoin is going to be an
Mhm.
international and global concept. So if we want to be transacting well enough on an international basis, we need to be getting and having these conversations around how do people in other cultures think? How do they process information? How can I better do my business by better understanding them?
Okay. You've swayed me. I mean, I didn't have a particularly strong defense of this. I'm a little bit allergic to the critical race theory thing because it tends to bleed into other topics that frankly brainwash and confuse people and turn out very unproductive students at the university level, from what I could tell. Not saying you're one of them. I'm just saying I don't know that the package of critical race theory is the thing that Bitcoiners need. I think the thing that would help produce productive allocators of capital and value in this world would be just more reading and writing and critical thinking, um, and developing those skills in every conceivable way. And I think like as you pointed out, the diversity of the experiences, that's a really good point. Like it's not limited to like flesh world, right? Or it's increasingly online. And that's actually another huge problem that we haven't talked about with the education system that I'm not sure if Bitcoin has a place in solving. It's certainly interesting though, because kids can make a lot of money. Like especially when I was at this middle school, there were kids trading, like little kids that had somehow like accessed, they had crypto, like they had like little stock portfolios in someone else's name that they're trading all day during class. It's kind of hilarious, but it's also like, why not? I mean, they're not learning anything in school anyway. You might as well start from it from a young age.
I mean, look, I don't disagree. Like, we need to be pushing people and kids to read and write a lot more. I think when I look back at the education system at large, there are so many, like, the topic of again, we're going there on certain things at this point. Like the topic of evolution, which is like taught in some curriculums of science, but not in all curriculums of science throughout this country. Like
Mhm.
science has its merits and debates. You can debate like math. There isn't really anything more than just like understanding the formulas, understanding how sort of different properties of math align with one another. When you go to
Whoa, math is racist. I don't know if you've heard, but this is 2021 and math is racist these days.
we're actually in
Not everyone.
2022, but
Oh shit! Yeah,
welcome
you're
to the
right.
new
Boom.
year.
You're right. You're right.
But the point I'm trying to make about this is like we could have the conversations around literature and around history. The truth is, literature is, to a degree, can be opinionated and biased. At least with history, there is bias as well, but you have a rooting of facts that, to a degree, you can't necessarily say this didn't happen. If there's enough evidence pointing to it, this did happen. You can't necessarily say that with science. Look right now at what we have dealt with as far as the scientific community trying to explain different theories and different situations to us. I am of the side that the
Well,
scientific
look at what we've extended the scientific, in quotes, community to be. There's no end. They add a new soft science to their realm of authority every year. It's unreal. This is the whole pharmaceutical industry has suddenly become a hard science. The
yeah, I
act of
mean,
like selling pills to people has become a hard science, as if we know, what reactions they'll have. It's crazy. I don't want to get our channel
no, I
deplatformed
don't
again,
either, but
but that's a
everyone should
hill worth
Google
dying on for someone.
the last topic of healthcare science, and then we can go back to this other off-topic tangent that we're on. Everyone who's watching, go Google lung cancer treatment Cuba. My dad and I had a very long conversation about this, but more or less, there is a near cure to lung cancer that is approved in Cuba. But of course, our American pharmaceutical industry won't push that through. So in case
Joe Rogan says it's vitamin D.
No, this is like a legitimate thing. Dude, this thing was honestly, people go like do some digging on your own. I went down the rabbit hole last night and it upset me because I lost my great uncle to lung cancer about 15 years ago. This drug's been in circulation in Cuba for over 30 years. Like, if this drug could have saved his life, I want heads. I want fucking heads.
Yeah, but Q, but this is the problem with the fiat world at large. This is every illness. This is every illness. They will I really don't want to get the channel demonetized, but
we got to stop this.
This is very pertinent to Bitcoin. Like, this is very pertinent to Bitcoin. There's an
live in person at Bitcoin 22. So if you want
absolutely,
throw shit at my head for bringing up critical race theory, I will let you throw a water balloon at me in Miami. But you have to buy a ticket right now.
Yeah, you have to buy a ticket. I don't know. I think the lesson from all this is think for yourself and do your own research, which are two things the Bitcoin community is excellent at. And be healthy, stay healthy, drop out of school,
get some sunlight.
Drop out of school and exercise. Drop out of school and lift weights. That's my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I always get upset over the notion that you can always take out a $250,000 loan at 18 years old to go get an education in whatever you want, not based on, if you want this major, you can only get approved for this much of a loan. If you go for this major, you can get a higher, etc., which is, I think, a much more stable system as far as student loans go. Or in the same breath, if you're 18 years old, you can't go and get a $10,000 small business loan, but you can go get a $250,000 student loan that you can't declare.
You should get that loan. You should get that loan and buy Bitcoin with it.
Don't do that. Please don't do that, people. We're not giving financial advice, but we're definitely not telling you to do that.
I don't know. I'm saying if you have access to someone else's money, you should be the play is to buy some Bitcoin with it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited, guys. We've got a Fedwatch coming up with Dylan, who is like the master of servicing debt for Bitcoin. I don't know if they're talking about that today. I don't know what exactly is on the agenda for Fedwatch, but this Fedwatch episode is going to be epic. Love having Dylan on the show. Ansel, CK, all monsters of the space. We've got Casey Carrillo coming on with Mark Maraia. And Mark Maraia is actually you should stick around for that episode, Q, because he's actually a brain about health. Like, he has a lot of interesting, tame, I guess you would call them conspiracy theories, but pretty well evidenced arguments against the normal medical treatments that people receive for like everyday illnesses. And I'm a big proponent of, suck it up, go exercise, like that kind of thing. But Mark's got the science to back it. So he's definitely one to follow. Stay tuned for that. But first of all, we haven't given away any Bitcoin today. So I want to put the Earn Carrot app QR code on screen, and I want to shout out a couple people in the chat. We've got D with us, Eastside Tony, Sergio, Bitcoin for the Hood, great Twitter account. Go follow Bitcoin for the Hood on Twitter. Vegan Zombie, Where Do I Sats? What's up, guys? Higgs likes my financial advice. Appreciate that, Higgs. Yeah, somebody should be winning that free Bitcoin right about now. So excited for you guys. Shout us out if you win the Bitcoin on Twitch. We're going to keep it coming. We're going to keep it rolling. We've got 3 more shows for you this week. We're going out with a banger this week. We've got Alex Savetsky debating Alex Gladstein. And if Savetsky survives that debate, he's going to move on to debate BitBoy Crypto. We probably should have had it reversed. He probably should have faced BitBoy first and then stepped up to debate Gladstein. But nonetheless, we've got 2 awesome, fiery debates coming for you in the next 7 days. Very excited for those. What are you looking forward to in the Bitcoin space, Q? Outside of the Bitcoin 2022 conference that you should all get tickets for using our promo code in the description.
You know, I want to go back a little bit to Nolan's kind of conversation yesterday. And like, I'm an outdoorsy guy. I spend, as you know, so much time traveling to go snowboarding or going hiking. I love to surf and I love the beach. I have a rule that anytime I go to the beach, I always walk out with a piece of trash that I find, just because that's the way I pay to go to the beach. Um, I genuinely believe whatever the next iteration of clean energy, and I genuinely believe it won't be coal or fossil fuel rooted, but rather like pure clean energy, much more efficient and able to reach at a wider length. And I think it will stem from Bitcoin mining development. Um, we saw yesterday, and I'll be talking about this on next week's Bitcoin adjacent equities, but I always forget Mr. Wonderful's real name, but he was on Pomp's show yesterday, and they were kind of talking about how
Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin O'Leary, thank you.
Yeah.
He was talking about how there's going to be a lot of institutional money. That means Wall Street is going to start putting a lot of money behind Bitcoin mining. I don't like the ESG stuff. I think it's all bullshit. However, I do think there is a weird benefit to just existing and then complementing the Bitcoin ecosystem with all this money coming in. I'm keeping an eye out to see what the next iteration of clean energy will stem from Bitcoin. You heard it here first. I'm making that call. I'm very bullish on and believing in that, because Bitcoin miners have the most incentive to cut their energy costs as much as they can, and it will come out of that.
Yo,
Yeah,
Q, I just got
Chris
some
is right
news.
though.
What did Chris
ESG
say?
is bullshit. Like ESG literally is what allows Tesla to be like, oh, we're clean energy, when in reality, like, no, they're not clean energy. All they do is sell their carbon credits to everyone. But on the flip side of it, I do think, because the Bitcoin community is so anti this ESG doctrine, if you will, regardless of the money coming into from Wall Street, the Wall Street heads will literally walk and be like, I will write you however many zeros you want in this check, but it needs to be carbon neutral, whatever bullshit tagline that their kids or their wives or whatever have been pounding them with. They'll say that in that meeting. The Bitcoiners will nod along saying, yeah, sure, we're like, we want clean energy. Like Bitcoin miners are genuinely incentivized to find the cheapest, most reliable source of energy. And if that means finding a better source of energy than our current electrical grid, fuck yes, they're going to do it. And I genuinely believe, I'm going to keep saying this because I'm going to will it into existence, but the next iteration of real clean energy will come from Bitcoin mining.
Hell yeah. Q, I just got word. Do you remember we were talking about Francis Ngannou? Francis has been tweeting about Bitcoin. He just announced that he is getting paid half of his salary for his next fight in Bitcoin through Cash App. I believe Cash App's going to facilitate this. So in the meantime, go to Francis Ngannou's Twitter, and you can drop your. They've been doing those cash tag drops, and they'll send you like. I think Aaron Rodgers sent me like $30 in Bitcoin. Like, it's not nothing. It's substantial.
Wait, you
It'll be a lot of
won?
money.
Oh, dude, I'm totally doing this.
Yeah, no, you can win. I've won like 2 of them. I mean, I feel kind of bad. There's probably people that need it more, but I think it's kind of fun to interact with Francis Ngannou. I'm trying to get his attention because we want to bring this guy on the show. So if you guys want to do us a solid, tweet at Francis Ngannou. He's the verified heavyweight UFC former and hopefully future champion. He's a monster. Watch him fight Alistair Overeem. Look it up on YouTube. His knockout of Alistair Overeem. It's riveting. Actually all of his knockouts are pretty riveting, but he's one of the hardest hitting guys I've ever seen. So I'd really love to get him on the show and have him talk about. He grew up mining, like literally shoveling sand in Africa. And his family back home in Africa uses Bitcoin. He sends them remittances with Bitcoin. So it's like he's got this incredible story to make it from there to Paris to the heavyweight champion of the UFC, knocking out legends. I mean, we got to get this guy on. So please tweet at him, guys.
Yeah, we're after yesterday's little segment, we're going to do a lot of, I think, a lot more sports content, at least once a week. I want to get that pretty face of our producers up on the camera as well. So I know McShane's a fighter and he's always going to want to talk fighting. I'm going to shout out my high school, I guess. Well,
There you
I'm a
go.
soccer head and basketball nerd, and I am the greatest fantasy football player you have ever never played against.
What do you think about Chelsea, Man City?
I'm an
You
Arsenal
watch that?
fan, so like I
Okay.
hate Chelsea. I hate.
Yeah. Okay.
Go away with your Tottenham nonsense, Chris. Our producer's a Tottenham fan and thinks they're like irrelevant just because they went to the Champions League's championship one time. Like, come on.
Chris was wearing a Tottenham hat in Nashville, and no one knew no one knew what it was.
What was it? What was it that Peter McCormick said to you when you got on with him and you were wearing
He said, "Is that a fucking Tottenham hat?" Like he was freaking out. It's so funny.
It's fine. We're all of us truly are Bedford FC fans. We are diehard Bedford FC fans. That's for damn sure.
I agree with Eastside Tony. He says sports are a shit coin. I don't know about a shit coin, but they are a time suck. I'll tell you that. It's some dedication to all these sports fans out there. More power to you.
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes like to tease my parents about like I was pretty good at FIFA. If you had just like not taken away my PlayStation, like I could be a professional FIFA player, maybe. I also definitely think I could have played professional at other things. So that tells you how big my ego is.
You're a tall guy, man. You would have made a good fighter. You'd have made a good like Muay Thai fighter. You could have smashed some people.
One of my like very, very dear friends, him and his brother are like very into the UFC. Like whenever I want to watch a fight, I go over to their place and we had a very long conversation about how like, dude, I'm 6'2". I weigh way too little for my weight. And he was like, no, you can still lose some weight and go to a lower weight class. Are you kidding me? I think it's truly incredible the way fighters especially like cut weight and are able to still maintain the physicality required to compete in the octagon.
How much do you weigh?
145 pounds.
What?
That's what I'm saying. I know.
You're 6'2", bro. I don't know if you can cut much more weight.
That's what I said.
People that are 6'2" fight 145, but you would have to gain muscle mass and then cut back down to 145.
I do not have a lot. Like you can.
Chris is 150. Oh my god, you guys got to bulk up. I'm 200 pounds, son. You guys need to eat.
I've given up. I've tried to bulk up since I was 14 years old. I've given up on that dream. I am
a couple atom weights.
Let me stay lean. Let me stay cut. So long as I can snowboard and bike, I'm good.
I agree with Eastside Tony though. Food is also a shit coin. You can stack more sats if you. Nothing tastes as good as Bitcoin feels. So just keep that in mind before you put on 50 pounds to meet me at 200 Q.
I think the most I ever weighed, and I was on like supplement after supplement, taking creatine, everything, working out. I think I was lifting 4 hours a day. I was 180 pounds. That's the most I ever got.
That's a solid weight for you. That's good. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Like Chris, our producer, brought up a good point that meat is very expensive. The carnivore diet is very expensive. But I would push back a little bit and say chicken's not expensive. Owning chickens, pretty inexpensive. Getting eggs from those chickens. If you buy a whole cow, like if you do it right, you're not going to be hungry. It doesn't take that much food to fill you if you're eating right. If you're getting your nutrients, if you're eating meat, if you're trying to be a vegan, yeah, life's going to be expensive for you because you're eating nothing and expecting to get nutrients from that, and you're going to be very tired. But if you get some like high quality meat, you only need to eat like once a day.
Dude,
my great grandparents both lived over 100 years, and they ate one meal a day. I mean, this 3 meals a day bullshit is very fiat.
I eat so much I couldn't do that.
I don't know, man. They were tall like you too. I think I don't know. I'm excited. Maybe we can get Ansel weighing in on this when he comes in. Looks like Ansel and CK are looking to join.
We should stop talking about everything that's pretty much not to do with Bitcoin.
I think no, but I will argue it does have everything to do with Bitcoin. You are what you eat. You are your diet. I mean, it affects your mood. It affects your wallet hugely. I mean, you can expect to pay $10,000 on groceries a year, probably more by now. That's like a figure I've had in my head for a while now, so it's probably way more with inflation. Like, the things you choose to eat matter. My bad sugar like habit after dinner, like that matters. That sugar, that adds up, man. It's expensive. It's
Dude,
not good. It doesn't feel good. It messes with your sleep.
processed food is the worst thing that we ever did to our bodies, and we have to unprogram from, I think, that.
Yeah.
The fun fact to Alex's point, and then we'll hand it over to the Fedwatch guys. If you eat 6 ounces of grass-fed beef versus 8 ounces of just like normal organic beef, you still get the same nutritional value, still get the same amount of calories and same amount of protein from 2 ounces less of actual like higher quality meat. So it ends up in the long run adding up and being cheaper. So keep that in mind for those of you who are like, I can never give up meat. Try to find the cleanest meat, and you will have the most nutrients.
Yeah, I think what people mean when they say like, oh, I can't do these diets, it's too expensive, like this, that. It's like, well, what you're saying is you're unwilling to change. Like, so it's not for you. You gotta want to change. You can't embrace like these new habits without wanting it. I think yeah, this is a great time. Maybe we'll go to a quick break, but I would love to hear what home cooking advocate CK has to say about this when we get back, because he's always tweeting out like the best food picks ever. So maybe a quick break, Chris, if you would, and then we'll be back with Fedwatch. What's up, guys? We are back. That's your chance. Listen, boss is coming in heavy. This is your last chance to get the YTMAG 21% discount on the conference. So get your tickets today. We've all got our tickets, and we're excited to see you all there. Non-stop events. We talk endlessly about the conference. So just go ahead and go to the website. Get your tickets today. Check the link in the description. 21% off with promo code YTMAG. And now I'm very excited to bring on Dylan, LeClair, Ansel, and CK for today's Fedwatch. So I'll let CK take it over from here.
What is up, Bitcoiners? Welcome back to another episode of Fedwatch. We are going to be simul streaming this Fedwatch both live on Bitcoin Magazine Live over at Bitcoin Magazine YouTube, as well as over on Bitcoin Magazine Twitter Spaces. I'm joined by Ansel Lindner as well as Dylan LeClair, both on Twitter Spaces and over on YouTube. Y'all, I would highly encourage everyone to get over to YouTube. And Dylan, why don't you unmute yourself? Let's get going with this show over both on Twitter and on YouTube. Ansel, welcome to the next episode of Fedwatch. We got a stacked lineup of things to talk about in the macro and Bitcoin world. Why don't you get started?
Yeah, so we skipped last week because of the YouTube deletion. So we have a lot of news to catch up on, and we also have super excited to have Dylan on with his all of his macro insights. So we are going to be covering his deep dive stuff. We're going to be covering Fed news with rate hikes, QT, quantitative tightening, and also a bunch of stuff from around the world, including China and the ECB. So jam-packed show. Don't want to waste too much time on the intro. Dylan, how are you doing, my man?
How's it going, guys? Happy to be on. Happy to talk some Bitcoin.
All right. Should we just jump right into the Fed news, Christian?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Fed minutes came out about 2 weeks ago on the 4th or the 5th, and you probably have heard this out there in macro news, but wanted to cover it here. It was a major hawkish surprise. The FOMC minutes said that they not only want to do, of course, the accelerated taper, but they also are looking at an accelerated rate hike schedule. And the biggest surprise was a possibly even starting to tighten. That means reduce their balance sheet and sell treasuries or mortgage-backed securities back out into the market. This one reason why it was such a surprise is just 3 months prior to that. So that was December minutes. So October is when they started the taper. And it was such a huge pivot at such a quick speed. It caught a lot of people by surprise. And since then, we've seen weakness in the markets, not a crash or anything, but weakness in the markets. So yeah, that's the big news out of the Fed minutes. Dylan, do you have anything extra that you took away from those Fed minutes or in the weeks since then?
Yeah, I would just, I think it's pretty interesting how quickly it's being priced in that the Fed is going to hike. Right now the Euro-dollar futures markets is saying 4 hikes in 2022. I think the Fed will hike until something breaks. Ultimately, it's that simple. They'll hike as many times as they can. And right now, if you're looking at oil or a lot of things that are increasing a lot in everyday people's lives, if the CPI is at 7%, if that's a true a true inflation rate or not, that's another debate. But the reality is life's getting more expensive for everyday people around the world, and the people on the left, people on the right, they're feeling it in their pocketbooks, especially Americans who, aren't too used to it. And so the Fed's ultimately stuck between a rock and a hard place, deciding whether to basically kill asset markets over the long run, maybe not today or next month or next quarter, or to curb inflation. And I think both are losing scenarios ultimately, and they'll reverse course.
Absolutely. I think they're setting up for what a lot of people are talking a policy error going into 2022. So we'll have to see. I think it's also interesting that this has become kind of an MO of Powell. He had the first Powell pivot back in late 2018 into 2019, and that was from tightening into easing again. And this time it's going the other way, from really easy policy to tightening very, very quickly. So I don't know. I just think it might become what he is known for, like the Volcker's known for raising rates really high and squashing inflation. That's the mythology around him. And maybe Powell will be known for these pivots back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, I think credit markets are in for a bit of a pain if yields keep rising. If we see treasuries continue to sell off. I think the 30-year, I was looking at it today, the 30-year government bond is down 17.6% from its peak. And so there's a lot of long dated duration debt out there, as well as a lot of equities, especially growth equities, that are priced basically because they're not profitable today. They're priced with at these very crazy duration type valuations. And that's why you're seeing things get like ARK, Square, all of these tech stock type companies. That's why you see them getting killed along with Bitcoin as of late, because Bitcoin is treated as this kind of macro risk on asset by, the institutional adoption of the last couple of years was by those allocators that sell in a moment like this. And so
I want to jump in and ask a question to y'all. Do you think that the Fed will actually raise rates? I know that there has been some theories that we've talked about on the show several times around, Powell sees this opportunity to assert dollar dominance, that now that he's reelected, he's in a different position. He no longer has to kind of walk the tightrope around how he's addressing rates. And now, again, that he's been reelected, he's starting to really diverge from the talk track of pretty much all other central bankers and emerge as the only central banker to, push a higher interest rate agenda. Do you think he's actually going to be able to go through with it? Because personally, I think it's just jawboning. And I have yet to be convinced that there's actually going to be any meaningful action. And even if there is, it's going to get taken back relatively quickly when things start to have a panic attack.
Dylan, you want to
So
take
if
that
you wanna take
first? Okay, I'll go first. I just think that, so if you look at inflation, right, because inflation is measured year on year, and so whatever happened last year affects the inflation numbers now. And that's one reason why I think that inflation is really going to cool off starting in April, like official CPI inflation, because that's when, rates or the CPI jump from 1% to 4%. And if that's the case, right, they're stopping their taper in March, and then they want to do some sort of accelerated schedule for all these other things. Right as inflation year on year is probably going to be cooling off. I don't know if the CPI will go back down below 2%, but I don't think we'll see anywhere near the 7% that we've been seeing over the last couple months. So I think it's really setting up for the April-May timeframe to see what Powell decides to do. Will he raise the rate once and just to say he did it? I don't know. He's willing to be wrong, so it could be that he will do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that breaking point is. I'm just salivating at the opportunity to see another similar event that occurred in March of 2020, or maybe that's too exaggerated of an event. But the last time that everything went risk off and equities went down 20%. Before that, when Powell pivoted, crypto also, if I'm on the correct timeline, I think that was the final capitulation leg from 6,000 to 3,000 following the blow off top of 2017. And there was other factors, but that kind of global moment definitely helped exacerbate it a little bit. And so I think whenever that comes, you'll see a complete devastation of Bitcoin and crypto broadly derivative markets. And you'll see that along with a sentiment flip, right? And that's really when the max opportunity is. At what price point that is in Bitcoin, or how far equities draw down, I don't know. If nobody knows ultimately, but we'll see what that pain point threshold is.
Yeah, I think it'll have to be a pretty big surprise to repeat something like 2020, but who knows? We saw it in 2008 and 9, and then again in 2020, so we could see it here in 2022. Muted, Christian.
Sorry, I would be very surprised. I feel like it's been very clear that the Fed and all stakeholders have all their eggs in the stock market. And I just don't see a universe where an individual or even one entity within the government has the political will to kind of go against those incentives. So again, my take is that we're seeing a lot of job owning around increasing interest rates, but we'll see. And if a March 2020 event happens again, boy, I hope I have some dry powder to stack the dip as I did back in 2020. But it's going to hurt people. And, we've been saying this a lot on Fedwatch, but Bitcoin takes the way of most pain, and it's going to do that all the way to hyper Bitcoinization. I have no doubt.
All right, next story up here we have is, I just thought this was an interesting tweet. So I don't really watch everything that Biden talks about, but he did have a speech that Joe Weisenthal tweeted about, and it almost directly says, starts floating the idea of austerity in the US. And I wanted to get your guys' take on it. Maybe I'm overreacting, but in his speech, he was talking about car prices. And he said there's two ways to get car prices down, either increase supply, and what he said was invest more and bring more capacity into the sector. Or the second way to bring car prices down was to make everyone poorer so that demand goes down. So that number two is straight up austerity. And I thought it was interesting because, maybe they're trying to set up the Fed as the fall guy for any bad economy. You know, the Fed is, now that Powell has been confirmed again, he can be the fall guy for any sort of bad economy that comes this year, while Biden has been trying to pass, all this spending stuff and new regulations and everything. So maybe the Fed administration is trying to set up this dichotomy between the federal government being dovish and the Fed itself being the hawk. So what do you guys think about that kind of political back and forth?
What I can't wrap my head around is why Jay Powell didn't hang it up and go take a vacation on some island and forget about it. Like, it's the worst job in the world, essentially, because he's going to be a bad guy for a lot of people either way. You can't win at this point where they really have no options, and it's just about, I think, like the perpetual like credit expansion and just everything bubble, assets go to the moon, and the wealth gap disparity increases, or there's basically a debt crisis, austerity that's happening regardless, but it's all going to crumble. And so when you're the fall guy, just so I'm not really sure in terms of what's going to happen first, or if credit markets continue to melt up. But what I do know is since 2020, and arguably much before that, the average standard of living of someone in the United States, the middle class, is falling materially, and that's showing up in CPI as well as just other things in general. Just people are spending less, people are in more debt, the quality of a lot of things in everyday lives is going down. And it's a slippery slope, but I think people are starting to really feel it now.
As things kind of fall apart within a society, you kind of see the stakeholders in place trying to maintain confidence in the system, right? And maintain some realm of like control and civility. So obviously, as things kind of fall apart, they're going to want to start, getting people used to the idea of having less, and for the world, not being wealthy enough for all the people here, and all the implications of that. And, I don't want to get too much into, opinion-based theory here, like to keep it as objective as possible, but there's just a lot of scary signs out there. And, everything coming from the administration in the US has been divisive, and, has really been pushing kind of this build back better in a different way, but we define better type of an agenda. So, they've been very consistent about that pretty much since, getting confirmed. So I guess that's my only kind of thoughts. And, weak times bring this kind of conversation, and it's sad. And ultimately, we have to overcome, and I think Bitcoin is that brighter future. Again, something we talk about a lot on Fedwatch is, Bitcoin is this hope of growth. Bitcoin is this better system for allocating capital, for making the world work productively together.
Absolutely, 100%.
It'd be a dark time without Bitcoin. That's for sure. I mean, 100%.
Yeah, I have an answer for why Powell stayed, though, is because, and Christian just said we're not going to speculate, but I'm going to speculate here. I think we've been reporting on this on Fedwatch, is that the kind of.
Sorry, we also lost you on Spaces, so I don't know if you want to try to get back on there, and then you can hit us with your conspiracy.
Okay, well, it's my phone went to sleep. I will. Crap, I'm gonna have to say this, then I'll get back on Spaces. So
all right, you're gonna miss Ansel's conspiracy, but he'll be back.
We've talked about this a lot, where the Fed is kind of decoupling away from the ECB, right? And we talked about Davos, man. We had Tom Luongo on the show, and so I think that Powell might actually be somewhat patriotic and think, I want to do what's best for the U.S. and I don't want to see Lael Brainerd take us down the road of CBDCs or that kind of thing. And so that's my answer for why Powell would stay, is because he's actually patriotic. But I don't know.
Dylan, do you buy that Powell is patriotic? That he's a patriot?
That's a tough question. I'm not really. I mean, I guess for whatever that means nowadays, but a lot of American ideals have eroded quite fast. And I think if anything, Bitcoin and the incentives and the coordination it incentivizes ultimately in a peaceful way is the ultimate form of being patriotic in the sense that we think about it. Maybe not patriotic ideals, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that's super fair. Back to you, Ansel.
Yeah, and I would just say, he serves American bankers. So if we're
Ansel, you
spending-
muted on Spaces. We're trying to get this clean, man.
Sorry, man. I'm trying to learn Spaces. So yeah, he serves American bankers. He doesn't serve Hong Kong bankers or London bankers. So if there is some sort of split and these central banks have to choose between who are they going to support with their policies, for Powell, it's a no-brainer. He's going to support the American bankers. So I guess if you would construe that as patriotism, that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway,
he's loyal to the existing system. Yeah, I would say patriotism is like, loyalty to human sovereignty and well-being and natural born rights. But yeah, I mean, I would say it's very interesting to see Powell maneuver in a very opposite way to other central banks. That is like the real key here, is that for everyone out there who thinks all central bankers behave the same, they don't. And the US central bank, kind of is running on its own course. I want to take a quick break here and remind everyone we are simul streaming this both on Bitcoin Magazine Live on YouTube. So if you want to watch video, if you want to see charts, go over there, as well as Twitter Spaces. So anyone requesting, we cannot let you up. We're having a closed conversation, but thank you for listening on Spaces. And Ansel and I, the co-hosts of Fedwatch, are here with Dylan LeClair, analyst extraordinaire, the lead analyst of the deep dive over at Bitcoin Magazine. And he also is helping BTC Inc. over at UTXO, which is a Bitcoin denominated fund. So doing some huge things in Bitcoin, and yeah, got a lot more great topics to jump into. Before we do that though, Dylan, deep dive, you and Sam put together an awesome annual report for 2021, which was an incredible year for Bitcoin. And I know that was something that y'all worked super, super hard on. Do you want to talk about that annual report and maybe tell people where they can get it if they're interested?
Yeah, totally. We put out an annual report, and with the deep dive, we focus on basically three things. Boiled down most simply is on-chain analytics and mapping out the historical cycles and what Bitcoin's actually looking like. Bitcoin, the asset, the transparent asset, that we can see all of the capital flows and everything that's occurring, the monetization process with 100% clarity. So that's one. The second is capital markets and derivative markets around Bitcoin and crypto, and what those are developing into and how those are changing constantly. And then we incorporate kind of this macro analytic backdrop and try to really quantify what's occurring in that and how it maps out and onto the Bitcoin market. And so with the annual report Sam and I put together, we really went in depth on derivatives and how that changed and how that exacerbated the local tops and bottoms of 2021, and the on-chain, just kind of mapping that out and seeing what it looked like in historical cycles. And yeah, so if you want to find that, you can find that in my Twitter bio, the deep dive, that Substack link there, and just you can see it as a free subscriber, and I encourage everyone here to check it out if they haven't.
Awesome. Yeah, Dylan, thanks so much for putting that together. I read it this past weekend, and it really was a very succinct look back on the year, and reminded me of a lot of the takeaways that I had, from events that happened in March, February, almost a year ago. And, you kind of forget what happened earlier in 21 just because, months happen in weeks in Bitcoin and years happen in months. So it's just so fast paced. The best place to keep up with everything that's happened in Bitcoin and macro too is absolutely Fedwatch. So find that Bitcoin Magazine podcast as well as YouTube. Let's get into this next topic. Ansel, back to you.
Yeah, so you
also unmute.
Okay, Twitter Space is ready to go. All right, so you were just talking about the other central banks And that's a good segue into talking about the ECB and the PBOC. So just yesterday, the PBOC, in a very surprise fashion, cut rates for the first time since April of 2020. So they are really dealing with a big time slowdown over there. And I think that they are telegraphing property weakness or property market weakness. This comes right on the heels of last week, Country Garden, which is bigger than Evergrande, and it has been bigger than Evergrande for about 4 or 5 years. So it's the biggest property developer in China. And they had a new $300 million bond issue that they were trying to float out there. And they had to abandon the sale because they couldn't find the demand for the 300 million bond issue. So this is telling me that, you know, not only Evergrande, but it's starting to spread majorly up the chain to Country Garden. Their bonds are selling at 70 cents on the dollar now. This is supposedly a healthy company. This is like the largest, healthiest property developer in China, and they can't float bonds, and their bonds are selling at 70 cents on the dollar. So this was a big event that happened just yesterday that I think many people are overlooking. Dylan,
can you mention the name of the property developer again? The new one that's in trouble?
Country Garden.
Country Garden. All right.
Yeah.
So first it was Evergrande, now it's Country Garden, and Country Garden is bigger as well.
Yeah, well, many smaller property developers have been having trouble over, you know, the last 6 months, not just Evergrande, but this is very significant because it's the largest and healthiest property developer in China, and they couldn't raise money when they needed to. And then right on the heels of that, China cut rates, probably trying to, you know, facilitate some relief for these large property developers. But Dylan, did you see this story, and do you have any commentary on China?
Yeah, I saw it a little bit this morning, and then when you shared the notes pre-show, and I think ultimately it's just we've seen the same story just repeat itself over and over again. It's just fiat credit contagion, elevated asset prices that lead to increasing speculation, which lead to malinvestment, which ultimately on the back end of a credit cycle, whether it's short-term or long-term, which has been developing for the long-term debt cycle has been developing for probably 5 decades now, or I guess if you want to look back longer than that, but with fiat more specifically, we're seeing that beginning of the unwind start to occur, and China is now front running it and going the other way and cutting. And so it'll be, I'm really fascinated to watch the dollar in 2022, and a lot of Bitcoiners trash the dollar, and for good reason, but it's the best of the worst within the fiat world, and the dollar denominated debt means that there's, you know, tens of trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars of people that are short dollars, short a large amount of dollars. And so if that begins to appreciate, it really accelerates and it wreaks havoc in the global economy. Basically, not just the US, but everybody is in a recession. So really fascinated to see how that goes over the course of 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, and notice that it was a $300 million bond issue. So this was a dollar bond issue. It was not yuan. Nobody really wants to do business in the yuan. It's not an international currency, even of any note at all. I think it's still counts Hong Kong as being an international transaction, and that's 70% of the international transactions for the yuan. So this is very interesting, and I still think that the Chinese bubble is going to be similar to the Japanese bubble, and it's just going to go into stagnation. So we'll see what the GDP numbers are that are coming out of China for 2021. We've already gotten some glimpses at some producer price index numbers that look really bad for the fourth quarter out of China. So they could be like the canary in the coal mine for this second leg of, I guess if you would call 2020 the first leg, maybe 2020 is the second, 2022 is the second leg.
Do you really trust any of the numbers out of China?
Dylan, you're muted on Zoom.
Sorry for the Zoom delay. Yeah, I said, do you really trust any of those numbers or statistics out of China, though? I remember looking in 2022, and there was like their their quarter GDP growth, their projections, and they had like nailed it on the head. And it was like 6 point something percent exactly for a bunch of quarters or years in a row. And so how real is that or not? We don't know, but we do know that there's some contagion regardless.
Absolutely. Well, we do know that like Michael Pettis and others who are China experts, that China calculates their GDP differently. So when we look at their GDP versus our GDP numbers, it's not telling us the same information. But yeah, I agree with you. All right, should we move on to the ECB, Christian?
Yeah, we definitely should move on to the ECB, but we lost you again on Spaces. So
oh my gosh,
the Spaces complexity is adding to all the things that we're trying to juggle while we're simulcasting. While Ansel's figuring that out, I'm going to show Bitcoin 2022. This is a great opportunity to show Bitcoin 2022. So getting Ansel back on, but if you want to see us in high fidelity without any sort of internet interruptions, you got to meet Dylan, myself, Ansel, Alex, Chris, our producer, Q, all of us in person, all your favorite Bitcoiners, really. I think the entire Bitcoin ecosystem is making the pilgrimage out to Miami. So go to Bitcoin 22. It's a 4-day festival for Bitcoin. The last day is literally a music festival. You can see the lineup. It's a lot of huge stars. Please at me if you have any problems. I love to engage and help educate people about the conference. You can get a promo code to the conference. I believe we're doing YT Mag for 21% off, and that is going to be ending at the end of this month. So don't at me about the promo code. That promo code dies at the end of the month, and then it'll be reduced to a 10% promo code if you want to get a discount. So y'all go get a conference ticket. And Ansel, sorry for the interruption. Let's get you going back on Zoom as well as Spaces.
All right. So the next few stories are kind of smaller. I'll just run through the ECB and some IMF news. So the ECB, they are talking more and more about inflation. They're running behind the US. They hit 5% in December, where the US is sitting at 7% for the CPI. And there's some worry about this, of course, the energy crisis, because their cost to heat their homes, because Europe is more north than most of the US. People don't understand that, even though their summers are pretty temperate from the Gulf Stream, but it gets really cold in the north of Europe, and they need that energy. They need that natural gas to heat their homes, and this energy crisis is scary. It's actually scary for the population when these energy prices are going up like this. So the populace is more worried about inflation, but the ECB is still saying, no, we're not worried. We're not going to raise rates. There is some risk from this energy crisis to exacerbate inflation, but for right now, we're not going to budge. Now, the difference between the ECB and the Fed's quantitative easing type stuff is that they have a built-in cap. So they have a program that would be, it allocated 2 trillion euros or whatever. And once that runs out, then it's over. So they don't have to necessarily announce that they're going to end. It will come to an end, and we'll see. I think that's scheduled. It was scheduled for the end of last year, but it's been extended, I believe, till the end of 2022. And we'll see how that plays out. The second kind of piece of this ECB is the IMF. They came out and said that they warned emerging markets that the Fed will be tightening at an accelerated schedule, and it could have dire consequences for emerging market currencies, as well as like just emerging market economies in general. So I thought that was very interesting. And again, kind of the narrative that I'm trying to build here is that 2022 is starting off on a bad foot, and it doesn't look very good going forward. And I just got kicked off of Spaces again. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
No, I think you're fine, at least on my end. Ansel, so I mean, yeah, I would say that things have been going wrong for a long time. 2017, 2016, there were signs of things going wrong, and there was major signs of things going wrong that a lot of Bitcoiners were pointing out in late 2019, prior to coronavirus happening, and a lot of the like quote unquote excuses from politicians and central bankers and blaming coronavirus for the economic woes. So, I mean, in general, like this has been a trend. Things have been going wrong for a long time. You know, when is it going to be that the people who've been calling this out are going to be, you know, quote unquote, proven right? You know, because I feel like, you know, there's been the people who calling it out for a long time, and sure, maybe they've been patting themselves on the back, but the world kind of doesn't acknowledge that these things are really falling apart yet, and they haven't really acknowledged, you know, that the gold bugs were right, or that now that the Bitcoiners are right.
I don't think they'll ever be proven right. I think it's going to be that because, you know, most people don't even follow this stuff, and the people that were wrong can just spin the narrative some other way. So I don't know. I think there's going to be everywhere other than the US. I think the US is going to have the best economy going forward, like for the next several years to a decade, and the rest of the world is going to be stuck. And that kind of brings us into the next story that I have, is the update on Kazakhstan. And I mean, all of these Central European or Central Asian countries are going to have problems, and that could spill over to energy markets, to other things. So, yeah. Dylan, did you have some input on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really bullish on Bitcoin mining and hash rate in general, aside from what happened in Kazakhstan. It's really, we're going to see some. I think the predictions of around 300 terahash are accurate. It's exciting to see Intel come into the game. It's exciting to see just I think the new S19J Pro immersion cooled ASIC just came out, which is like, it's pretty mind blowing. And so we're gonna see hash rate completely bend upwards, and maybe some of these weaker Bitcoin miners start to feel a little bit of a hit. Not so much. I mean, the profit margins are wide, but I think there'll be continued Bitcoin miners going public, being spun up with maybe some inefficient power sources, or leveraging up on a lot of cheap capital, and we'll see if they can make it through, because ultimately that difficulty is going to continue to ratchet up forever, or as close to forever as we can think of.
Yeah, I included a couple links on my last newsletter from Friday about the situation in Kazakhstan, and there was this one article, I can't remember which, it might have been Bitcoin Magazine, but I can't remember where I read it, but they were interviewing a Bitcoin miner from Kazakhstan, and they were saying that they are barely breaking even at 40, you know, 45, $50,000 of Bitcoin. And that is nowhere near what's happening in the US. So I think the Central Asian countries, these miners are going to flee out of there and probably head somewhere, either Northern Europe or the US. Any thoughts on that?
I'm in terms of Europe, it's pretty fascinating, and I'd like to hear your input, Ansel and CK. In terms of the energy crisis and all of this stuff that's happening, at the same time, you see all of these European countries shutting down nuclear plants, while also saying that green energy is the future. And it's something that, you know, the people that actually care about this stuff and follow, you know, global macro or follow these trends on Twitter will yell and scream at, but the general populace is basically totally unaware of this kind of almost seemingly controlled demolition, which, you know, what are your thoughts? Why are they closing down all these nuclear plants at the same time as is the biggest energy crisis we've seen in a while?
Oh, well, this goes into my thought process on European globalism, right? They're losing this global, I guess, power struggle, and ESG comes from this globalism camp. And so ESG is the big push behind getting off of fossil fuels. And also, I guess nuclear would just go into that. They want to be able to control everything much more, solidly. But Christian, you have obviously opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it is posturing. I live in California right now, and in California, we used to have multiple 3, 4, 5 nuclear facilities, but I know we're down to just one, and there are plans to decommission it in the next couple of years. And it accounts for 10% of California's energy. And the thing is that, you know, they're decommissioning it for marketing purposes, but there's no plans to replace that energy. And people in LA, people in the major cities like they're already paying Europe level prices, and they're going to take another 10% of capacity away. And the only thing that they're doing is shipping more natural gas in from other states. So like the actions behind, the posturing are not quote unquote green by any measure. So, I'm assuming that wherever there's this like fiat lobbying ESG mindset, you're going to see a lot of misallocation of capital that way in the energy markets. And that's why I'm personally so into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the antithesis of this bullshit. And Bitcoin is going to empower pretty much everyone who's willing to oppose kind of this globalist ESG movement. And it's going to make them incredibly wealthy because there's going to be a massive arbitrage opportunity between energy costs and Bitcoin price.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's a value transfer. And right now with Bitcoin mining, essentially you can take $10,000. I mean, this is a total estimate and it's variable depending on a bunch of inputs, but you can take $10,000 of energy and arbitrage that into $40,000 worth of digital monetary energy, if you want to call it that, that can be sent anywhere in the world in a split second. And it actually, protects your property rights. So that contrasted against fiat, ESG, carbon credit, clown world cronyism definitely has me bullish and thankful Bitcoin's around.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up this Kazakhstan story that there's about 1 million barrels of oil a day produced in Kazakhstan, and it's mostly by Western companies, actually, like Chevron and Shell and stuff like that. So if Kazakhstan is marginally under Russian control, do these companies fall under sanctions under the Russian sanctions? We don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but it could have a direct impact on oil prices, which again would have a direct impact on inflation, quote unquote inflation. And I just got kicked off of Spaces again, and I tapped it, so I don't know what's going on. Last story I have is Tonga. Of course, they announced, or there was a thing on Twitter there from one of their parliament members saying that they will be most likely adopting Bitcoin as legal tender this year. And then they had the eruption that just happened this last week, so or over the weekend. So do we have any thoughts on that? And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. So sorry, before you jump in, Dylan, I believe Ansel got kicked off of Spaces again. So if you want the best conversation, go over to YouTube right now. The link is pinned to the top with Ansel's tweet in the nest. Go and watch the conversation there. In general, it is really incredible that, pretty much Bitcoiners are the only people talking about Tonga, and then this happened. So not trying to bring in too much opinion, but it's really insane to hear. I heard that there's no internet. I heard that travel restrictions are making it extremely difficult for aid to get in and out. I heard that there's water contamination issues. I personally have not been following the story super, super closely, but it is absolutely, absolutely insane. Back to you, Dylan.
What is the population of Tonga? I'm not even sure.
I think it's about 125,000.
A nation nonetheless. It'd be a cool number 2. But I think regardless of if Tonga accepts, it makes Bitcoin legal tender or not, or, they have other important things to worry about, obviously. It's quite tragic to see what happened, but there will be more nations that come. And I suspect multiple in 2022, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, President Bukele was teasing that exact thing for Bitcoin 2022. So I know he has some plans and has teased some announcements. But yeah, Ansel, did you have any specific comments about Tonga other than the fact that it's a horrible tragedy, a massive humanitarian issue, and something that, if possible, we should try to help with? I know that Lord Fusitsu, who is a Tongan Bitcoiner who is, leading the charge on making Bitcoin legal tender, has shared a Bitcoin address or link to an address page or a donation page where you can donate Bitcoin. So I'll try to dig that up. But in general, try to learn more and support what's happening in Tonga. But yeah, over to you, Ansel.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the listeners to fill me in on links to that. So everybody look down below in the show notes. I'll make sure to put it in there wherever you're listening to this. Hopefully you'll have a bunch of links from all the stuff we talked about, and will be a link in there for that as well. I just thought it was interesting. I hadn't talked about Tonga probably for 20 years, and all of a sudden we talk about it 2 weeks ago on the show, and then they had this this volcanic eruption. So yeah, it's a tragedy.
In regards to, we just talked about, the legal tender there briefly. A little off topic, and this wasn't in the show notes, but did you see Bukele's meeting with the president of Turkey next week? He tweeted that just recently. Yeah, I mean, that's all he said, but it's pretty interesting.
That'll be some fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. With Turkey in particular, they have a currency crisis because they have dollar denominated debt, and they have no international or external demand for the lira. So it'd be interesting to see another country with dollar denominated debt adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender. It would just be quite an interesting dynamic. We'll see if it happens.
Well, they've banned Bitcoin, haven't they, Turkey? So
yeah, definitely have some regulations, but it would be interesting if they, I mean, the citizens are routing around them regardless, but
yeah,
if the government or the administration became out as pro freedom money, that'd be quite something to see.
Yeah.
Our producers are saying that they did not ban it, but I don't know if that was Google searched or not.
Maybe they banned exchanges or something, because I remember that was came out last year.
Ansel, I guess I think we have a slightly different audience, but maybe you can share again like your theory about as the euro and a lot of these other fiats crash, what do people in places with dollar denominated debts do rather than flip into the dollar, and how Bitcoin plays into that?
Well, when times start getting bad, there is going to be a collateral shortage, because the way that money moves, high-powered money moves around the world, is in collateralized repo transactions. So somebody has excess treasuries and somebody has excess dollars, and they swap, right? And that can form a chain of collateral. That's how we don't even know what the true supply of treasuries is, the true size of the market or the true number of dollars is, because there could be, one treasury could be rehypothecated 14 times. And how do we count that? If the Fed owns whatever 30% of treasuries, well, that does, that 70% that the Fed doesn't own could be rehypothecated 5 times on average. That puts the percentage down of what the Fed owns. But anyway, so yeah, as there's a collateral shortage, that will turn into a dollar shortage, as these countries can't pay their dollar denominated debt. And that's why that's where my deflationist kind of standpoint comes in, is that there's going to be a rush to the dollar as this, the global economy slows down and crashes once again. The end of the dollar system, in my opinion, is deflationary, not inflationary. And Bitcoin will have this parallel system on the side of that, that people will hopefully be able to, just shift over. Now, when does that occur? I think it's, who knows, $50 trillion market cap or $100 trillion market cap for Bitcoin, who knows? But it's got to be much larger than 1 trillion to have this, parallel shift over to a Bitcoin denominated system.
I completely agree that and think that is kind of the logical way that things will play out, but we'll see how things actually play out. I did pin to the top of the nest on the Twitter space a link to places for people to donate. I also will try to fish it up and throw it into the chat over on YouTube. But yeah, everyone look into what's happening in Tonga. Dylan, Ansel, before we wrap up the show, any other topics that we should jump into? I know we smashed hash rate all-time highs. I know despite what's happening in Kazakhstan, which was kind of a big region for mining. Anything, again, back to you guys for if there's anything else that we should hit on.
Yeah, I think just in terms of Bitcoin native markets, 40K looks strong. We saw derivatives like begin to flip bearish in the sense that perps funding, perpetual swaps, futures perpetual swaps, the funding rate, which basically is used to tether the derivative markets to the spot market price, went negative, meaning that derivatives were leading negative. And usually crypto, Bitcoin markets broadly are always bullish, at least slightly, moderately. And so, we kind of see most of the time we'll see long liquidations in the sense that a bunch of people lever up because they're enthusiastic and sentiment is very high and they think prices are going to go up. But you start to get short squeezes when sentiment reverses and you see people leverage short Bitcoin. And so we haven't really seen that play out in full. We haven't seen that full, bearish flip yet. But if 40K continues to be a strong level for spot markets, you could start to see these derivative bears start to get a little more aggressive. And I think that's when there'll be a nice bump in that price, but we'll see how that unfolds.
I have nothing to add. It was great having you on, Dylan. Guys, check out our back catalog of Fedwatch episodes. We talk about not only a deflationary thesis, but an inflationary thesis. And we have great guests like Dylan on. So check it out next week. We're hoping to get Jeff Schneider on, and that should be a big show.
All right, y'all. If you're in the audience on Twitter Spaces, go follow Dylan, go follow Ansel. They are two of the best in the space and really excited to have them both involved with Bitcoin Magazine. If you're also in the spaces, highly recommend to go over to YouTube and watch the rest of Bitcoin Magazine live. It's our daily live show. And then lastly, come see everyone here in person. The best place to get involved with the ecosystem, to get more entrenched in the ecosystem, to shake hands with every single Bitcoiner in the Northern Hemisphere and hopefully the globe if we can get people into the United States, is Bitcoin 2022. It is an absolute must go to event and it is going to be absolutely huge. We already have incredible speakers and many, many more to be announced. So see y'all there, and until next time, peace.
Great to have y'all on today. Awesome to have another episode of Fedwatch. Great to see Dylan LeClair again. So, hey, what's up, Q? How you doing? You want to bring it back for me? We've got a couple more, about 15 minutes here until we go live with Meet the Plebs. So Casey Carrillo coming in with Mark Maraia, who you may have seen around if you're on Bitcoin Twitter, but otherwise he'll be new to you. Very knowledgeable Bitcoiner. Very excited to have them both on. Yeah, and I can't second enough what CK said. You guys need to get your tickets. I heard there's a shortage and that you should buy your tickets today. I heard they're having supply chain issues. I heard the trains are being derailed in Los Angeles and they can't get tickets. They can't get enough tickets. So you got to get them today. You got to get them with the promo code YTMAG for 21% off. That's a limited time offer. So please click the link in the description. If someone gets their ticket while we're on air, I'm going to drop like 10 carrot codes. So please get your ticket, benefit everybody in the chat. Go do it today. If you're thinking at all about coming, now's the time. How you feeling about that episode of
Today
Fedwatch?
you can throw one water balloon at me.
Oh yeah, if you get a ticket today, you can on stage.
Nah, not on stage.
Okay, if you get your ticket today,
I know it's coming.
If you get your tickets today, we're gonna put Q in a dunk tank for like a whole day of the conference.
I'm just gonna be preaching critical race theory from the dunk tank.
Oh,
Honestly, like sometimes I don't know why we gave Q a microphone. Sorry to jump in here, gents, but I'm just like, oh God, why do you say that? No.
I know when I'm saying those things that are gonna make everyone cringe. I say it too. I'm like, everyone's gonna hate me for saying this, but someone has to say it on the show.
No, it's good to have opposing opinions. Yeah, sorry. Back to you, Alex. I'm gonna peace out, guys. Peace.
Yo, catch you later, CK. Thanks for coming. Yeah, it's good to have a heel. You're like the wrestling heel. What do we got? Our producer says he's gonna cut your mic, bro. How does that feel?
And you're about 5 weeks too late on that, Chris.
Yeah. What do we got? What's left over from our argument from earlier? Anything still rattling around in your head?
Nothing going around in my
I
head.
feel like we didn't have a good. I feel like we always start like 2 or 3 like decent conversations that are just like a total derailment from the show. We never get to finish them, but we got some time now.
Let's gab it out. Where did we?
We're talking Bitcoin
Where do we
and
want to
education.
explore?
I feel like the end of like a lot of these like anarcho capitalists, like libertarian Bitcoiners, like they want to raise their own kids. Well, obviously, sorry, and they want to educate their own kids, which is interesting idea to me. I don't have kids, but having worked in the public school system, I'm wary of putting any child, and having been through it, like what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a logical conclusion for Bitcoiner families? Actually, one fine example of that is Nolan, who we had on earlier, who's actually sovereign, living between nation states. I think he just pays like federal taxes in the US and that's it. And I'm pretty sure he teaches his own kids. So
Yeah, I mean, I kind of brought it up when we had Nolan on about like the small little communities. Like, I remember right when lockdown started, tech investor Jason Calacanis kind of brought up, oh, like if there are any teachers in the Bay Area, like please message me. I have a group of parents who all want to like hire a teacher. I definitely think that that is a viable solution. You know, allowing the government to give money specifically earmarked to citizens, saying like you get X number of dollars, and you can put it towards the public school you want to send your kid. You can put it towards part of the private school education. It will nowhere near cover the full thing, but if you want to use it towards that, that's your choice. If you want to use it towards building out your own small ecosystem, you can as well. I mean, homeschooling has been around in our country for generations now. It's not uncommon. And I think especially today with the access for information, I mean, we are in the information age that the sovereign individual described. YouTube, I learned how to code on YouTube, man. Like I never took a computer science course. Like, yeah, I took Lex's like online curriculum, but it was an online curriculum. Like it's on you. And I think it goes back to that conversation we were having about like wanting to eat healthy or not. It's the what are you willing to do the work for? And a lot of it comes down to, and I say this where like my friends ask me like why do you work out every day? Like how do you have the energy to go work out every day? It's like I don't. I'm exhausted, I'm tired. Like when I wake up in the morning, I don't want to do it, but I love to go biking. Like I literally bike with a gorgeous view, or I go down by the beach and I'm biking down there, or I'm going through like some fun little like hill over here to go mountain biking. And I make it fun. I end up spending 2 hours on my bike, but I don't think about it like that. It's just like I'm enjoying myself. And you have to find a way to make the work enjoyable, but while recognizing still that it's work, it's not play.
yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the direct correlation with that in Bitcoin for me is that Bitcoin, I mean, I was like pretty dedicated to like sport before Bitcoin, but it definitely extends like the amount of free time you have at your disposal to put towards things like cooking at home, which is you're going to make better decisions. You're probably going to eat healthier if you have to cook your own meals. Cooking at home and exercising both. And I think the Bitcoin community, more so than any other community besides just like meathead Twitter, really do a good job of exploring different health lifestyles, because there's no one fit for everyone. We have two like completely different, like you're way taller than me, like we have totally different physiques, totally different backgrounds, totally different racial backgrounds, which is a history of different kinds of food being eaten, which means like how you take that food in it's different, like biologically, like on a chemical level. Like I feel like milk would treat the two of us differently.
Totally.
Yeah, and so you have to like explore these things. I think Bitcoin's good for that too. It really like pushes people to, and not to make this just like a guru show just about everything, but we've all had these experiences. Like you might as well talk about them. Like in light of Bitcoin, I mean, you tend to do your own research more. So, you know, you're more open to other people's opinions when you've understood Bitcoin for a while, because you've already admitted that you didn't know something, right? You've gotten over the hump. You've managed to express like, oh, I can be wrong about something quite fundamental to my existence, something like money. So wrong. We all were. We were all miseducated and misguided in that regard. And so it kind of like opens the door to wondering like, what else did I think I know that I didn't really know, or what, you know, was kind of downright misguided and wrong, that's been rattling around in my head all these years. And I think when it comes to food and nutrition, much in the way that they've lied to you about how money works, how much money there is, just kind of said it's, you know, it's too complicated, we'll take care of it, brushed it under the rug, kicked the can down the road a couple 100 years. The same thing has happened with like the Harvard nutritional studies of the early 1900s, and, you know, just about every other big centralized institution that could cash in on like pharmaceuticals and healthy food choices. So I mean, don't leave your health, don't leave any aspect of your health on someone else. That's not, no one else can be the warden of your health for you. You have to take responsibility for that. You have to take self custody of, you know, your eating choices, your movement choices. I mean, I recognize that we all probably live much more virtual lives. Since getting into Bitcoin, I spend way more and way too much time online, but it's important to just kind of like recognize that and address it, I would say, if you want to increase the longevity with which you can actually spend your Bitcoin someday, or spend it with family.
I mean, you bring up a really good point too about, you know, for many people watching, the Bitcoin rabbit hole was probably one of the first or early rabbit holes that you really went and explored and understood something that you may have assumed you knew about or just accepted. But then as you learn more and more about Bitcoin, you educated yourself and changed your perspective on what money is, what the economy is like, the effects of certain decisions, both politically as well as financially, that impact your bank account and your bank balance. And if you apply that mentality to anything you desire, it's, you can garner similar results. You apply that to what you want to eat. You want to apply that to how you work out. You want to apply that to how you want to raise your kids or teach your kids. It is in essence all the same thing, and it pushes you to, I think, take the onus on yourself to learn and continue to learn. And that's one of the big things I think about the Bitcoin just ecosystem. It's a constant endeavor to learn. We're never done learning, and it doesn't stop at just Bitcoin. It's everything about life. We don't stop learning.
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, the the only evidence of life, you know, like the most simple definition is change. You know, without change there is no life. So like, I think increasing um the amount of things about your life that you're willing to change is an advantage, because, you know, you see a lot of people as you grow up kind of get weeded out, fall into complacency, become static individuals on some level or another. And I just don't think it's, and I'm not saying like settling down to start a family is bad, but you can do all of those things. You know, you can have your routine while still be open to new ideas. And I think that's everything. I think the people who are willing to and looking for and need something new, and who want to kind of embrace things after verifying them, are going to be very receptive to Bitcoin, and you're going to see them become the wealthy, you're going to see them become the entrepreneurs of the next 10 years. And I think other people will probably be left behind. I mean, I think every year that goes by that you haven't embraced Bitcoin, or even spent a little time to look into it, you're punished by that. That's the game theory of Bitcoin. It's sad, but true.
Yeah, I mean, you can only lead them to the water, but we can't force them to drink it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Um, yeah, I mean, like I always say on the show, it's like the people who need it or the people who are ready to hear it will probably come to you if you're the point of Bitcoin, like the source of Bitcoin knowledge for them and the family. Like when it comes, there's a certain price where they will break psychologically and they'll have to get in. And unfortunately, that price always comes at a higher price than today. Like the good thing to do would be to get in Bitcoin now while we're at a major discount from the all-time high. I mean, we all know it's going to go higher. It's a question of when. It might be a circuitous route to the top, but we're all going to make it eventually. So like now's the time to accumulate and grow, but that's not what you see. What you see is retail investors getting scared and leaving. And they're not leaving for crypto. The crypto market's dried up. Like they're just leaving. They're storing their value and their trust back into the fiat system.
I also
Which
think
means.
Sorry,
that?
keep going. Sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was gonna say which means they didn't learn, which is okay. Like that's great. I don't think any of us, I'm not saying there's one use case for Bitcoin. I'm not saying there's one perfect way to like be a Bitcoiner. I don't think there are any Bitcoiners. There's just people who use Bitcoin and have it in different sort of ways. But I think eventually, like that first point of contact, even entering the market and leaving it scared, selling your Bitcoin, I think most of those people will come back and they're going to be more savvy than they were the first time. Like maybe they actually sent Bitcoin on Cash App, or maybe they practiced withdrawing it from like a BlockFi or a Coinbase. I mean, that's going to put them at a real advantage, when this market gets turned around, or maybe when they have a change of heart somewhere down the line. So I think it's good. I think all contact with it is good. And I think actually the other, cryptocurrencies are kind of good at reeling people in for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's another thing too that I think it sometimes gets lost in these conversations when we try to like talk about new people coming into Bitcoin or get involved with Bitcoin or make your first buy. And it's this idea or notion that like Kenny said it yesterday, like number go up, or Bitcoin is going to be worth more in a year or not. Like, should I invest my money? But at its core, for those of us who like genuinely believe in what Bitcoin can provide beyond just a financial medium, a financial means of transacting peer to peer, as well as a store of value, we can get into the merits of the order of that on a different day. But I think there's this notion still, unfortunately, that it's, how much is it worth? Is it going to go up? But like, can it go up in value? And you say it best a lot, in my opinion, where it's like, I don't necessarily worry about what is Bitcoin in relation to the dollar worth today. I care about how many Satoshis or how much Bitcoin do I have in my possession. And that's how we increase our net worth. That's how you increase your property value, is by adding Satoshis to your account, not by, I stacked the dip. Great, do that. I'm not saying don't, but this notion of what is Bitcoin worth, there's going to come a point in this entire Bitcoin ecosystem where that's no longer going to be part of the conversation, because what are we tying that worth to? We tie it to the dollar now because the dollar reigns supreme, because we're in a petrodollar system. But what happens inevitably if we are all right and the dollar is no longer the supreme currency?
I'll let you go with that, Q. I'm really thrilled that we got to talk today. We had a lot of good conversations going. We'll be back. Q will be back, I'm sure, tomorrow. We've got Bitcoin. We've got Meet the Plebs coming up next. We've got Bitcoin to give away, but we're holding the Bitcoin hostage until somebody buys a conference ticket. If one of you buys a conference ticket, everybody's getting sats. We'll make sure everybody in the chat gets some sats. If nobody buys a conference ticket, nobody gets Bitcoin. 21% off with promo code YTMAG. Those tickets are scarce, guys. You're not gonna have one. You're gonna want one. The speaker guest list is just getting cooler and cooler. Thousands of more people buying tickets. I'm gonna make you FOMO into getting these tickets, guys. It's gonna be a great event. So short break, and then we'll be back with Meet the Plebs.
Yeah, good to see
Yeah,
you.
you're all set up. You're all set up. You're in Colorado, right? Are we live?
You're live.
All right.
You're in Colorado.
Sorry, I missed your countdown, Chris. What's up, guys? We've got Meet the Plebs here with us. Exciting. I don't know. We didn't have a Meet the Plebs last week, right? We got our channel deleted, so we missed it.
Yeah, we had to skip it.
We had to skip it. So we're back. This is going to be twice as value packed and fun. I got the chance to meet our guest today, Mark, in Nashville. Super cool, super knowledgeable Bitcoiner, just super well-rounded guy on everything. So I'll let Casey take it away from here and enjoy, you guys. Don't forget to tell them to buy tickets to the conference, because if they do, we're going to give them all Bitcoin. But if nobody buys, we're not releasing any sats.
You heard him, guys. You need to buy those tickets if you want those sats. So get to it. We do have a code for you guys, right? YT Mag is the code.
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat right now.
All right. But yeah, jumping in to Meet the Plebs. It's great to be back. Second time on the live show. So super excited, of course. And I couldn't have a better guest, author, lawyer, contributor here at Bitcoin Magazine, and now contributor liaison for the op-ed team. So you'll all be seeing more of him. Mark Maraia, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Casey. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I've had some excellent conversations with Mark already, both in person and online. Like Alex said, he's got such a incredible background that there's much to speak about. So I guess let's jump right into it, Mark. You have an interesting sort of story about getting into Bitcoin that sort of involves your background. Do you want to just tell us about it and how you got involved?
Absolutely. So I was a practicing lawyer, and I was actually a banking lawyer, and then I was a securities litigator. So I understood sort of the banking system and the securities sort of environment that we're in the United States, at least from the inside. And so I was probably working for all the cantillionaires that we talk about. But then in 2008, something obviously happened that we all got our attention, which was the financial crisis. And I knew something was broken, and I really lost confidence in the banking system after that. And as I think I have said to you in our conversations before, I didn't really trust the banking system. I mean, I had my sisters who were very trusting of the government and the system, and I'd go, hey, I don't really trust the banking system. And for the longest time, I really didn't know where to go. And I knew I didn't trust the banking system. And for whatever reasons, I didn't really I got involved with Bitcoin in terms of knowing about it maybe as early as 2012, but didn't see it as a solution to some of our problems until 2020, like a lot of other people. So it's been, and when I got in, it was in March, bought a little bit in March. I actually had a Coinbase account because there was a young lawyer who I've written a couple of books. One of those books is called Rainmaking Made Simple. And he reached out to me, and he called himself a Bitcoin lawyer. Now, this is in 2014, Casey. So not exactly a household word. There weren't any large law firms that were trying to hire people. And he reached out to me. He liked the book. I met with him. He helped me set up a Coinbase account. And then inexplicably, I didn't fund it until March of 2020. But it was at least on the radar. But the funny part of the story, as I just said, is I didn't trust the banking system, but I didn't see Bitcoin as a solution until really 2020.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight, but I am curious, what were some of the things that you found in the banking system that you didn't trust or that you saw as problems that really solution presented Bitcoin, it was presented as a solution to?
Well, there's a lot of them, and some of them are more insiders. So for example, most people don't know this, the US Treasury market, they rehypothecate. That just means that it sits on more than one bank's balance sheet. Those treasuries sit on more than one balance sheet, which really means the system's way more fragile than anyone realizes. But as long as nobody heads for the exits on those treasuries or needs to claim them as collateral, no problem. It's the most heavily regulated industry. When I went to law school in the early 80s, it was probably then and still is the most heavily regulated industry. There's a lot of middlemen. They don't create any value. I had taken over my dad's portfolio. He had a pretty traditional portfolio. And I realized that the people that he was using to manage his money, he was good at making money. He wasn't very good at investing it. So he handed it off to an expert. And I realized that there were just 12B1 fees in mutual funds. Most people don't know. Those are basically a hidden fee that people collect against their customers. And almost nobody knows they're even having that taken out against them. So there's a lot of middlemen. There's a lot of excess regulation. That would be my perception. I'm sure it isn't from the perspective of the government. And a profoundly unfair system. I think, as Ross Stevens said in one of the interviews he did, in, I guess it was 2021, last year, with Michael Saylor. So you could see all that as the insider. So there were a number of them. If literally, I would say, and I think you and I were talking about this, if everybody understood how bad the banking system was, they'd be having a revolution by morning, to quote Henry Ford. And it's literally 200 times worse than most people can imagine, which most people don't want bad news. They're already trying to get through their day as best they can. And it's almost overwhelming as it is. So I'll pause there and see if that gives you enough insight. I could keep going on and on about that one. We probably do a whole podcast on that one.
No, I'm sure. I mean, the fiat system and all its, troubles. I mean, it sounds like what you're describing is basically the wealth of the nation being plundered underneath everyone's noses, right? And I mean, like you said, we could probably go on all day about the different problems in that system.
Well, and I do want to make this point, and I think there are some writers, Bitcoin Magazine writers, who've made this point, as well as others. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that you can essentially commit theft in plain sight. Things like inflation. I don't think most people realize that when you put your money in a bank account, it's not your money anymore. It's actually on the bank's balance sheet. And as people in Cyprus found out, as people all over the world have found out, when you go to collect that, what you think of as your money, you may learn it's not your money. And I hope that doesn't happen here, but I knew enough about the system to know that's the case. And I don't think that's widely understood or widely known.
No, certainly. I think at large that sort of system is taken for granted here in the West. So, but moving on, I guess, Mark, you have had tons of experience in your life in various areas, various industries. I'm curious, outside of the sort of technical business side of things, what life lessons you would describe that you've sort of extracted from Bitcoin.
Right. And they're still coming by the day, right, Casey? I mean, as we've said, we don't change Bitcoin. Bitcoin changes us. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's ever been a technology in my lifetime that is more transformational than Bitcoin. And because money is one half of every transaction in the economy, it's hard to overstate how important that is. And I think in one of the articles that I wrote for Bitcoin Magazine, I actually called it a once in a species invention or discovery. And I'm not sure, I'd actually love to debate that sometime with our fellow contributors. Is it an invention or is it a discovery? Because of the whole notion of absolute scarcity, I still think we're trying to grasp what that means. And I feel like we as a species are still uncovering what that means. And there's some great writers. I mean, we could go on and on about that. But what I was shocked most about is that Bitcoin really humbled me, because in spite of my being a lawyer in the banking system, in spite of my knowing that the system was broken, I really don't feel like I learned what money was until I actually went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, which was really November of 2020, when I really went all in with a whole lot more funds, which then motivated me, obviously, to learn about what the heck I had just done. And it's just impossible until you've done enough homework. You hear people talking in superlatives, people call it truth. All of those are true, and they're still not going to fully describe what we're talking about. The other thing that I've noticed is, and I use this a lot when I'm talking to sort of the boomers of the world and even younger folks, is the K graph. Thank you, or hat tip to Croesus, who did an article, I think, in Bitcoin Magazine, and he showed that basically Bitcoin is doing this, going up, and the dollar's doing this. Why would we save any of our life force or our life energy in something that is such a poor preserver of our life energy and our life force? And I could go on, but those are a few of them that really, I think, strike me as amazing. The other thing I want to say, though, is too, having been a business owner for quite a number of years, cash, and you've heard Ray Dalio call it trash, but it's a liability. So because of that K graph, any cash I have, even though it's listed as an asset on my balance sheet, it's not an asset on my balance sheet, whereas Bitcoin is, and it gives us all an alternative that is, if you understand it, it actually gives me a lot of hope and a lot of confidence in the future.
No, definitely. I think I totally understand that. And as you were describing, it is a kind of a debate on whether we discovered this or invented this. But either way, I think sort of what you were hitting on also was it's hard to really understand what money is until we have another representation of money that's so much more conducive to what we can understand. And then we look at the fiat system and we're like, oh, this is so much more complicated than it needs to be. And as we described earlier, it extracts value out of the system in ways that aren't necessary. And yeah, I think it takes that sort of perfect representation, or maybe not perfect, but another representation to really compare.
I think that's exactly right. And I think people look at us like we've got four eyeballs, right? I mean, we've all now been to family gatherings where it's like, or friends, can we talk about something other than Bitcoin, right? But when you realize just how powerful it is and how many problems it starts to solve in the system, it leaves me encouraged. And at the same time, it is amazing. We don't teach in school two very important topics that, in my opinion, are the most important things you can teach a human being in modern society. The first is actually more important than money, and that's health. Okay. And the second is wealth, or money. And we don't teach that at age 4, 5, 6, all the way through college. When we do teach people in college about money or economics, we teach them Keynesian economics, which to me is really teaching them propaganda about money. And as you said, until you actually understand that there's something that's so many standard deviations above what we thought was possible, we can't appreciate that whatever we thought about money, we can throw out the window because it's a poor representation of what's possible.
Oh, definitely. I'm curious, you mentioned the two things that you would really like to see us, teach in school is health and wealth. I am curious, and you always talk about health, both you've talked about it in person, on Twitter, in Telegram. So
to Alex.
To everyone. So I am very curious, Mark, why you, consider health so important and even above teaching about wealth.
Well, I mean, honestly, I had parents who had plenty of wealth and they didn't have health in their last 5, 6, 7, 8 years of their life. My dad had something called PSP, which is sort of a form of Parkinson's. And my mom had something called COPD, which is emphysema.
Sorry to hear that.
And they would have traded probably their entire wealth for health. And I also, starting in 2007, had a work colleague who was diagnosed with some metastatic prostate cancer, which led me down the path of learning about the connection between food, soil, and health. And so I've been a student of that far longer than Bitcoin. And I would absolutely love to see it taught in 4 to 4-year-olds and older. Because when you don't have your health, and I watched my parents, and I spent a lot of time with them. I was privileged to be able to do that. I don't care how much money you got. It doesn't really matter. And the other thing about Bitcoiners in particular, and the reason I'm excited about having them as an audience for this kind of thing, as Bitcoiners, we're more likely to accept responsibility for our wealth, possession of our own keys. As a result, I think there's a likelihood that they're more likely to appreciate accepting responsibility for their own health. So rather than relying on the government, me listening to my governor or the president is never going to help me get healthier, because all it is a series of do's and don'ts that's way too late in the process. I either have a healthy immune system and a healthy metabolism, or I don't. There are literally solutions in the world that I did during COVID. Rather than study Bitcoin in March, I was studying the healthcare system even more, which I perceive as broken, by the way, before COVID hit. But I learned, for example, that there's a non-invasive way to treat heart disease using vitamin C and lysine. It's called the Pauling treatment protocol. People can Google it on their own. And it's literally, by comparison to triple bypass surgery, it's non-invasive, meaning I don't have to slice my chest open, grab veins from my legs, and go through this incredibly expensive six-figure process, and instead take vitamin C and lysine and reverse heart disease through, and Pauling explains it very clearly. And he was called a quack, by the way, by cardiologists, which if you follow the money, you understand why he was called a quack. But when you read what he read and when you understand his theories and his reasoning for it, those people who have heart disease can reverse it using this protocol. Well, that's like, if I could shout from the rooftops, healthcare information, it's the #1 killer in the United States, probably around the world, and absolutely nobody knows about it. And then again, as a lawyer, what I'm also concerned about is what I call informed consent. So my father had triple bypass surgery. Was he given this as an option? No. And that's not informed consent. So I would love to start some companies, and hopefully we start seeing businesses pop up that rely more on Eastern medicine and natural medicine as ways of resolving or achieving optimum health, is maybe the way to put it.
I mean, that's exciting to hear about, but also I think you touched on it yourself, where you said Bitcoiners and people who are looking at health differently have much in common, and Bitcoiners are going to start looking at health differently. I've never learned so much about health since I joined this community. And I think there's a predisposition to doing the sort of research that you just described, where you go beyond what's the standard taught stuff. And you really go for the verify, not trust sort of ethos, and finding out on your own how health really works. And no, I think there's definitely an overlap there in sort of how they operate.
Absolutely. In fact, if you want to put it in the show notes, we can do it. But I also want to just let people know, if they're curious, there's 2 websites I would go to. And I went there in March of 2020, one of them, which was called Orthomolecular News Service. And if you just Google that, you'll see a string of articles starting in January of 2020, well before even in the United States even knew what was going on, where all these orthomolecular doctors were talking about using things like vitamin C, vitamin D, that they were actually designated as treatment protocols in China. And again, when I would Google what's the treatment protocol in China, Google would tell me there isn't one, right? There's no treatment protocol. Whereas if you went to this website, it's like, well, hold it. Yes, there is. And so you start to understand, when you follow the incentives in our healthcare system, they might just be worse than the incentives in our monetary system, if that's possible, or equally as bad. But the beautiful news is, if, as Bitcoiners, if you really care about your health, there's a lot of resources out there. And I will make this offer to anybody. If you want to get a hold of me, I'll be happy to share what I've learned, because to me, there is literally nothing more important than my health. And I've learned that from all my friends, my family, those who've had health issues. And I hope to not take it for granted, because as soon as you do, that's the road to obviously having something less than optimum health.
Absolutely. And I think Bitcoin and health are going to continue to be related to each other. But I guess bouncing off of sort of what we've been talking about, I'm curious what you wish the impact of Bitcoin to be on the world is. And I know you have actually had a project sort of related to this, so I might, I'll let you talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a company that I've actually, there's a couple of things I'm doing. So I view food as medicine, which I think is now becoming very common, but I also view soil as medicine. And one of the things that I did in 2021, once I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, is I actually felt it was important as an impact investor to invest in those things I wanted to see around long term, and that would be healthy soil. Well, that's not exactly an everyday discussion. I love it that there's Bitcoiners in this space who are talking about it. It's almost unbelievable. And I was involved in an organization called Slow Money, where they said, look, if you're not working on something that will not be achievable in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. And so I actually went to some small farmers. Two of them are in actually Colorado. The other one's actually in North Carolina, Asheville. And I literally gave them some Bitcoin to put on their balance sheet because I see a direct link between those. So that's a project that I would love to see. Actually, there's a Charity Water. You're probably familiar with Charity Water. I think they have like 50 Bitcoin that they've collected to help clean water around the world. I would love to see a soil guardian faucet. I think there's an article on this in Bitcoin Magazine. Yep. I would love to see something like that started maybe by Bitcoiners so that we start funneling all these funds to soil guardians, as I call them, the small farmers. I also call these small farmers healthcare heroes because, and it's not to take away from the people working in hospitals, but those folks are actually keeping us healthier at the prevention level. The folks in the hospitals are fix me after I'm broken. That's the disease care system. And I would love to see a soil guardian nonprofit started that literally is an alternative funding mechanism so that the people who are preserving soil, embedding carbon in the soil, could actually have a funding source that doesn't require government money or subsidization. And what people don't understand is we can reverse climate change in record amounts of time if we had enough farmers using what are called restorative practices in order to restore our soil, because you're going to embed more carbon in the soil. And the benefit when you live in a state like I do, like Colorado, when you have a lot of carbon in the soil, you're also preserving and you're making yourself less at risk of droughts, because that soil, that acreage can hold more water. So it's more resilient, just like the Bitcoin network. So I would love to do that. And another one, just so that you know, I would like to start a healthcare or wellness company that has all these natural remedies, and you show people on the front end how to utilize natural medicine to do things, all based, by the way, on science, how to reverse health issues at sort of a one-to-one level, rather than, I mean, I still encourage people to go to their doctor, but there are so many different ways to resolve health issues, and the knowledge gaps there are huge. Again, because we don't teach it.
I mean, those both sound like excellent projects. I do recall your Soil Guardian article, and I thought that was an excellent idea. The overlap between our farmers and Bitcoiners actually seems to be quite great. And I think the two, sort of working together.
They go together.
Exactly.
They really go together. What struck me, Casey, having been in the slow money world first, and really have been a fan of farming and small farmers and restoring soil and restorative practices and resiliency in the soil food web. I mean, all of that was how they link up so beautifully, because in addition to starting these companies, thank you, Michael Saylor, I want to make sure that we've got Bitcoin on the balance sheet, because what happens is now you've just built and started a company that has got a way better chance of surviving past any other business that might be competing against us, because they're dealing in the melting ice cubes of dollars rather than the growing purchasing power of Bitcoin.
Right. Not to mention that the incentives of the company are now aligned with their treasury and how they need to grow that treasury, right? Like you said, people are dealing with the melting ice cube of fiat. You have to change your business practices. Whereas companies, if you're solidified around hard money, theoretically, you should be able to choose the best for your business rather than just the best for your pocketbooks.
Right. And again, it's disease care system is what we have now.
Right. Yes.
I think a lot of Bitcoiners understand that's as broken as the money. And there are a lot who would, and I know of people who volunteered that, hey, they want to eat, much better spontaneously, to your point earlier. And so they understand that in order to really be healthy, you have to have a strong metabolism and you have to have a strong immune system. So one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of vitamin C, if I had to choose between vitamin C and Bitcoin, I might choose vitamin C, not because Bitcoin's horrible, but because it's my health. I'd rather have my health than wealth. But the amazing thing about it is it's literally the most vital nutrient that we have. And what's interesting is Pauling found out that most people have what's called subclinical scurvy. That means that basically we are almost all of us deficient in vitamin C, not bad enough for your doctor to tell you, but bad enough to get a whole host of diseases, including COVID, because your immune system isn't where it needs to be.
So that means we can call everyone scurvy dogs now, right?
Yeah, there you go. You said that, I didn't.
Right. Let's pivot, Mark. But before we pivot, I want to make sure that everyone who's listening right now is going to Miami, April 6th through the 9th, Bitcoin 2022. If you're not going to be there, I'm going to be so disappointed. I want to see everyone's face. I want to meet you. I want to shake your hand. Let's make it happen.
And
if you're not there, you're going to get subclinical scurvy. That's all. So.
That's right.
Well, and I want to give people an additional reason to go, which we may go to anyway. So as Casey, I don't know if Alex, myself, Ulrich, and Mike Hobart, Ulrich Patillo and Mike Hobart and I drafted the Declaration of Monetary Independence. And we're going to hopefully have a 20 by 30 foot rendition of this declaration that we want you to come to Miami to sign, because I think it'll be a really cool 1776 vibe. And I'm hoping, as you said, Casey, we can shake a whole lot of hands and get your autograph. So
yeah, no, I mean, show up, sign the dummy. It's going to be great to see everyone in Miami. It's going to be cooler than it was when we had it in June. So it's going to be great. But Mark, when everyone is there in Miami, they're going to be looking to network. They're going to be looking to get these Bitcoiner jobs because no one wants to work in the fiat world anymore. And you have an excellent background in networking, talking to people, and really building these sort of professional networks. Could you just, any primary advice you would give to these Bitcoiners who are hopefully attending Miami with us?
Absolutely. So I've written a couple of books, both of which are about networking, and I define networking at a very practical level as putting people together for their mutual benefit, which really kind of fits in the ethos of Bitcoin, period. But what I've learned since going down the rabbit hole is, for all of you thinking of attending a meetup in your city or coming to Miami for the conference, your mindset is not only putting people together for their mutual benefit, but it's also for the benefit of the Bitcoin protocol, for the benefit of the Bitcoin network. And I would suggest that each and every person who's listening to this podcast, what I had the privilege of doing is working with some of the best rainmakers anywhere in the professional services world. That was mostly lawyers, accountants, engineers, consultants. And what I noticed with the most effective rainmakers is that they were just naturally good at connecting people. And I love this space because you guys are so much smarter than I about a whole lot of things. But what I would say is the one gap is I don't see enough what I call peer-to-peer networking like we got to do in Nashville. I got to actually visit with Alex and Chris and yourself. And that was fun, right? I mean, to me, that's more fun. And you build a different relationship that way. And what I think the younger folks think of is that Twitter is networking, which it is, but it's not peer-to-peer. I would say one of my favorite people in the Bitcoin space is Ray Youssef at Paxful, because he's all about this peer-to-peer. And when you walk into a room full of people, when you're at the next meetup, your mindset ought to be, okay, I'm here to meet people, but I'm also here to put people together. Who can I put Casey together with that might be to his benefit? Who can I put Alex together with that might be to his benefit? And what happens is your mindset shifts, because when you walk into a room full of people, most of us are very self-conscious. When you're going into the meeting or the networking event or the conference, and your mindset is, I'm there to put people together, your focus is on other people. And if your focus is also on putting people together, not only for their mutual benefit, but for the benefit of the Bitcoin protocol, all of a sudden connections are being made that I think will surprise people at how much impact that can have when you get face-to-face and when you get on phone calls, and even in chat, there's some chance to do that. It's not quite the same in a chat, but I think that would be the one definition of networking, because I think most view networking as, what do I get? And that's 180 degrees off from the way at least I've been teaching it for 30 years.
I mean, I think it's what you said is an excellent perspective on really how to approach networking. As you said, it takes a little bit of that pressure off of, I'm here to make connections. Who do I meet? How do I meet them? How do I present myself? And as you said, it's more about the benefit of the network as a whole. And it's certainly a different way to think about it. And I'll totally agree with you, Mark, that my Bitcoin journey entirely changed when I started meeting up in person with Bitcoiners.
Interesting.
There's no substitute for having that in-person connection, as you said, the peer-to-peer network. Twitter is great and all, but you just can't beat meeting up in person. So I encourage everyone to go to their meetups, go to their networking events, and go to the conference, because it's going to be like all the Bitcoiners in one spot.
Well, and I want to just one more point on that, because for those of you who are on Twitter, and I have a Twitter account, but I don't really use it, right? As you know, I'm in the Telegram chat. I can't believe I am, but I am. And I've been enjoying it, by the way. But what I would say is, until you get to either a phone call or a face-to-face meeting, you build a different kind of relationship. So even with contributors, I know that all of us are now focused on trying to benefit from their expertise. And the more we have interactions with our contributors, our writers for Bitcoin Magazine, the better the content that we get and the stronger the relationship. And my second book, literally, I think, is the explanation of why I do this. The name of the book is actually called Relationships Are Everything. And I think that's true even without Bitcoin, but I think Bitcoiners can appreciate it even more, because the original ethos behind the white paper was peer-to-peer. And I think we think of Twitter as peer-to-peer. I don't think of Twitter or even DMs as quite the same as phone calls, as meetings, as coming to conferences. So I would totally encourage all of you watching this to really think in terms of adding more face-to-face time and or phone time with people, because it builds a different kind of connection.
I agree with Mark, and I definitely think everyone should do so. Mark, what we're discussing could be considered a bit more of a older idea. I mean, you are from a different generation than I and most Bitcoiners. So I guess what's your perspective on the biggest changes of the world as a, quote unquote boomer, as someone outside the average range of Bitcoiners? And what do you think the impact is from that sort of perspective?
Well, first of all, I have absolutely loved working with all the Bitcoiners in this space. I mean, literally, most of you guys are probably half my age, and I'm loving it. And I'm learning a lot from you guys, and it's definitely keeping me humble. When I'm talking to my peers, it's a really interesting conversation. And I've stopped trying to convince anybody about Bitcoin. And I think this is true whether you're, sort of my peer group or you're half my age. What I find is that people are going to, when they're ready for Bitcoin, they'll get it. I usually want to understand what most of the friends that I have are very successful. They don't need Bitcoin, and I don't try to convince them of it. But what I've noticed is they see the problems in our economy. They see, I love, there's a phrase, we're all in the same storm, we're not all in the same boat. And I think people who are sort of, we're privileged. Even those of us in the United States who maybe are way more at risk, we're still privileged compared to a lot of the places around the world. And I think we forget that sometimes. I definitely think my peers forget that. What I love working in this space for is you guys kind of keep me motivated, because it's a reminder, okay, it's about my kids. So I had the reverse problem, Casey, right? So dad learns about Bitcoin and then orange pills his millennial children, right? So that's just not the usual story, right? You hear. Now they've gotten into it and they get it. One has gone down the rabbit hole further than the other, and it doesn't matter. My son actually, who's a CPA, he's kind of working for the cantillionaires, right? So he's not going to get it. I love utilizing the conversation around what is money, hat tip to Robert Breedlove, because I think until people tell you what their understanding of money is, it's almost a joke to even talk to them about Bitcoin, because it's just too far to travel. And until someone perceives a problem, they're not gonna embrace the solution that's unbelievable, right? Once it is species invention, Bitcoin, they're not going to embrace it until they understand there's a problem. And I think all of us forget that. That's not just me with my peers who are boomers. I think it's at every age level. And in fact, I was at a meetup with somebody who was quite a bit younger, and she said she was trying to orange pill her sister, who's a lawyer in a firm in New York City, in a large firm that I happen to have done work for. And she was frustrated because her sister wasn't getting it. And I said, look, don't try so hard. It's okay. Just love your sister. Don't let the fact that your sister doesn't see the brilliance of Bitcoin to be the reason why you're not connected with your sister anymore. And Definitely. She understood that. I mean, to her credit, she understood that. And I think all of us forget. There's just a certain segment of my peers who I literally will tell them, you don't need Bitcoin. Now, they may at some point, but I always love that, because psychologically that usually shifts the conversation to, well, what do you mean?
Why not?
Right.
We're a bunch of fish who don't know what water is, right?
Exactly. Fish discover water last.
Exactly. And
right.
I guess we can, maybe consider ourselves lucky, or maybe just predisposed to discovering what this water is that is Bitcoin. But yeah.
Well, and Casey, I think, anyone that's sort of your age group or younger, you literally do not know what it's like to earn interest in a savings account. So we as a culture, and really around the world, have completely decimated the ability to save money until there was Bitcoin. So the younger folks get that, and they embrace it sometimes with, they jump in with both feet. And I don't think folks at sort of my peer group, they knew what it was like, and they've kind of gotten, I don't know what the right word is, complacent. And there's a lot of people doing all they can to just get through the day. But I think the younger generation in particular, you now have a savings technology. Oh my God, I would have loved to have that savings technology when I was in my 20s and 30s, because, you're not compounding it 6%, you're compounding it on the low end 40 or 50% if it slows down, and 100 and some odd percent if it keeps up the pace it's been going.
Definitely,
which is
definitely.
Cool.
I'm excited for it. I feel lucky, but bouncing off of what you were just describing, I'm curious the difference between how you would describe Bitcoin to someone who's younger versus how you would describe it to someone who you consider a peer or more your age.
Yeah, usually with the younger set, and I actually actually triggered my first article that got published in Bitcoin Magazine. It was called An Open Letter to My Children. And I literally sent it to them before I submitted it to the magazine. And I tried to explain to them that, look, you work, you get paid. and you get paid in a money that's called the US dollar, which is the dirtiest clean shirt of all of the currencies in the world, but nonetheless, it's doing this. And there's another asset, digital asset, that's doing this. You might want to think about how you store your energy. Because you guys have lived in a zero interest rate environment with all kinds of dysfunction that's so obvious, particularly post-COVID, you could see state overreach at so many levels. We don't have time to go into it, nor does it matter, but it actually gives them something, or a technology that they're native to, and that actually, I would think, gives them a lot of hope. My peer group, I actually usually say, hey, get your phone out and download a Moon wallet. So I've started to do this lately, and I literally was doing this with people. I know one of them was a billionaire I did this with, and just said, hey, can you download this wallet? And he had downloaded the Moon wallet, MUUN. And once he downloaded it and put it in his 4-digit code, I sent him some Bitcoin in the space of obviously seconds. And once people have that experience, even at my age group, it cuts out. I don't need to understand, the 3 phases of money, that it starts out as a store of value, then it becomes a medium exchange, and then it's a unit of account. Their doors are blown off when they see that. And when that happens, there's no trying to convince them. I've now done this. Literally, this is back to the whole peer-to-peer question from earlier. It's my hypothesis that if 5 million Bitcoiners took it upon themselves to get as many people off zero as possible using whatever technology they wanted, it doesn't have to be a Moon wallet, and they did it, let's say 5 million people did it with 20 people a year, that's 100 million people a year that we're adding to the network. Now, some of them aren't going to know what they have, right? They're going to have a tiger by the tail and they don't understand it. But I think more often than not, what I've noticed is people get curious. So what I tend to do in both age groups, but different things make them curious, is how do I ask questions that get them curious, or how do I demonstrate how easy it is to use? And after I've had them download that Moon wallet and I've sent them some money, sometimes I'll have them send it back to me in a Lightning, on the Lightning sides, because it's cheaper, and they've literally received and sent. But I'll say there was no government that got in the middle of it. There was no bank that got in the middle of it. They could ban Bitcoin tomorrow and you and I can still transact in this. And that starts to get the wheels turning for the people that I'm doing this with, which is admittedly, it's going to work better probably with my age group, maybe than with your age group. I think your age group is predisposed to see the brilliance of it.
Yeah, I think there's like with my age group, it's like the experience is so apparent that we just need to be described what Bitcoin really is and what problem it fixes, and we understand almost intuitively. Whereas, as you said, with your group, it's more like you need to show them the real use case of it and all that. But hey, it looks like we got a conference ticket sold. Excellent, guys. I think,
awesome.
Can we give out Bitcoin now? Is that allowed? Since
yeah, we're releasing the Bitcoin. We were holding it hostage until someone bought a ticket, and we peer pressured them into buying a conference ticket. Let's go. So if you don't have your ticket yet, you're one of the remnant, and you need to get your ticket, because we're all going to be there, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be an opportunity to quit your fiat job and start on the right path. It's going to be the biggest networking opportunity of the year. Now I'll hand it back to Casey with that. But
networking with purpose at the conference. Please come sign the declaration. We love it.
Seriously, it's going to be so exciting. Glad we got past our hostage of the Bitcoin that we were going to give out. And I mean, you were absolutely right, Mark, with the differences in the experience and how you have to describe it. I am curious, sort of rounding out our questions here, what you're most looking forward to in the Bitcoin space. And I guess to add on to it, a price prediction for 10 years from now.
Right. I really, there's so many things I have encouragement around, some of which we've talked about. I think if we start to see soil health improve, if we start to see more countries start to adopt Bitcoin, I haven't mentioned this already, and I think I had read about the Kardashev scale, but I didn't know what it was. I think Bitcoin mining is the most beat up sector for something that is likely to take the human race to 1 on the Kardashev scale, which, as you know, Casey, means the civilization knows how to harvest all of the energy from its own planet and its sun, which we're not even at a 1 yet. So I see in the future that happening. I see there, we already see races by mayors. So it's really interesting to watch how mayors are almost competing against each other to say who's going to accept payment in Bitcoin or who's going to put it on their balance sheet. Rio's mayor just did that. I am pretty confident that that's going to keep happening at the local level. I hope it improves our food supply. I hope it improves our soil over time, because again, Bitcoiners can appreciate, hey, if I'm going to be fully responsible for my money, maybe I need to be fully responsible for my health. That goes back to air, water, soil, food, and ecosystems, including energy. I also think more nation states are going to jump in because we are treating, when the Fed prints more money, it disproportionately hurts the most vulnerable countries and people on the planet. And the other thing that I knew before I get into Bitcoin, I didn't know it was our monetary policy that was causing it, is that we are a consuming nation. And when you have monetary policy that keeps trying to pull from the future to spend in the present, to paper over and put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, that actually is the worst thing for our climate. And almost nobody in our government talks that way. It's like, it's completely over their head. So I am hoping even by the end of this year, if there's an honest examination, no guarantee there, I think more leaders from around the world are going to start to link our climate effect to our monetary policy. They're clear as can be. I don't think it's even, if you really understand, I don't think it's even in dispute. As for price predictions, I think you and I have had this conversation. One Bitcoin is still going to be worth 100 million Satoshis at the end of 2022. I really don't tend to do a good job of predicting that for 2 reasons. One, there are a lot of people in my age group, back to your earlier question, who see Bitcoin as an investment, and that's fine. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. And the more we talk about price, the more we create that perception. The other thing, and this is again how I sometimes talk to, again, more people, my peer group, I will usually tell them, gee, did you know that Bitcoin reached dollar parity in February of 2011, and it's now worth 42,000 times more than it was 10 or 11 years ago. And that's still talking about the price, but it's talking about the purchasing power. And I think I hope Bitcoin and Lightning Network become invisible sooner rather than later, so that it's just a way to send value over the internet and nobody thinks about it that much. I also think that long term, there will come a day where we're pricing oil and other commodities in Bitcoin. I mean, what's that?
The energy to energy sort of comparison,
yes.
Right?
Well, I mean, it's already, I had this argument with with Eric Yakes, one of our contributors, who's also written a great book called The Seventh Property, about Bitcoin. Technically, he says, is not backed by energy. For the average person, they're not going to get that. He's right. But Bitcoin is fueled by energy. It converts electrical energy into hashes, into energy that you can store forever. Thank you, Michael Saylor. And you can send around the world in seconds. And once more of every segment of our society starts to get that, we're going to see Bitcoin everywhere and Lightning Network everywhere, but it'll probably be more invisible. And I actually hope we get to Satoshi standard rather than Bitcoin standard, because in some respects, I'm not sure whether Bitcoin standard will happen or not. Back to price prediction. I think it's more likely that we'll get to Satoshis as being our standard.
I sure hope you're right. I have way more Satoshis than I have Bitcoin. So it would really be helpful for me if we could use that as our standard rather than Bitcoin.
Yep.
But no, I mean, there's so much to look forward to, as you said, that goes beyond just Bitcoin. There's the impact on health, the impact on the environment, and the realigning of the incentives of all these power structures that are sort of creating the problems that we experience today. I mean, just so much
Absolutely.
to look forward to.
And one other thought I have on price that I haven't seen in podcasts very much. Greg Foss does a great job of sort of calculating that Bitcoin is like a CDS on sovereign debt, which I think is a brilliant insight. And he literally comes up with the value of, if you will, the asset, the digital asset. And I think we all know that there's the digital asset, Bitcoin, small b, but then there's the network, capital B, and there's the protocol, which is actually separate as well. Those are the rails that the asset runs on. I personally feel that I can value those rails at whatever number I want. And in my estimation, just to have some, a number, that's worth at least $400,000 for each coin that travels on those rails, because it's never been hacked. It's run by a single purpose set of computers that is so decentralized that you can't shut it down. And until somebody figures out how to hack SHA-256, it's way safer than the SWIFT system, which is where US dollars run across those rails. It's like comparing a rickety old fence to a modern bridge. The Bitcoin network, those rails, that's why I put it at $400,000 a coin alone. The coin's worth whatever's the coin's worth. The network, I don't think we're valuing it yet fairly. And again, it's still early days. So that actually enters into my thinking in terms of how to value it.
I've always been, I've always liked the idea of sort of valuing Bitcoin, the asset, in terms of what you think the value of the rails are, because the protocol itself and the network itself is, I mean, I don't know, people disagree with that certain perspective sometimes, but I think its usage is really what, the usage of the network is really what gives it its value. So to sort of connect the two right there is I think, a great way to look at it. 400,000, certainly a great situation to be looking at, hopefully. Mark, I mean, we could go on for days about so many different subjects, but it's been absolutely excellent to have you on here. And thank you for joining us. And hopefully we get to meet everyone in Bitcoin 2022 in Miami.
Absolutely. Come and see us and come sign the declaration. We'd love to meet up with you. Thank you. Appreciate your time, Casey.
Thanks again, Mark.
And all you do for Bitcoin, keep it up. All you guys.
Of course. And we'll just send it back to this Bitcoin Magazine Live team. Thanks for having us, team.
Absolutely. Love it. Can't wait to have you on again, Casey. Can't wait to have you on again as well, Mark. Thanks for joining us today and having such a great show. And I just wanted to reiterate, shout out to whoever bought their conference ticket while we were live on air. That's a first. That's pretty exciting for us. We'd love to get some more. Yeah, would love to see a couple more of you guys FOMO in and get your tickets so you can come meet us and be on the real show live on the ground in Miami. I'll interview you if you come to the conference. We'll talk. You can be on Bitcoin Magazine Live. Our humble let's see how many people, 41 person show right now. I want to, do we give away all the sats yet for today? Not yet. Okay, we're still dropping some. We're still dropping some sats. Hopefully people on Twitch get some. Hopefully some people on YouTube. But yeah, Carrot delivering as promised some sats to you guys. Eastside Tony needs to win so he can send some sats to his friend in Africa. Where in Africa? Eastside Tony. Tanzania. We've got all right, we've got some more codes up getting ready to give out for you guys right now. This is great. All right, guys, we're back tomorrow. Let me check the lineup for you real quick. We've got a big show tomorrow. We've got Nolan again with the Breakup. This will be episode 3, hosted on our platform. He's got a couple other episodes on his own channel, so go check out Nolan Bowerly, his channel on YouTube. We've got Q coming for Q's doing Bitcoin Book Club tomorrow. He's got an interview with. I'll let you find out tomorrow. We'll keep it a secret. We've got Zebedee, which our producer Chris is going to run. He's going to interview the guys over at Zebedee to talk Bitcoin and basically like play to earn. I think it's called gaming, Bitcoin gaming. They give away sats, play games. It's great. And then we're going to do the deep dive. We're going to do it live, and we might pipe it into the live stream. I'm not sure, but nonetheless, we'll be on Spaces at 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So that's all tomorrow. Big show at 1 p.m. Eastern. Got a lot of content to pack into just a few hours. Very exciting. Yeah, that's it for today, guys. Don't forget to buy your tickets to Bitcoin 2022. 21% off with the discount code YTMAG. And when I tell you that discount's going away, it's going away, guys. I get emails every day to delete that discount, and I'm holding out because I want you guys to get your tickets while they're cheap. Price is only going up for him here. So if you even think you know someone that wants to go or you want to go, get your tickets now. You can always resell them. I don't recommend it though. You guys should definitely just come. They're scarce. They're going fast. We're filling up these this arena. I don't know what it is, the Miami Convention Center, I think, on Miami Beach. It's huge. It's multiple football fields in length and width. Yeah, it's going to be a great time. We're going to do a lot of live shows from there, a lot of media opportunities for people, a lot of great interviews happening. I'm super excited to see all of you who have your tickets, which based on the polls, I do consistent polls of you guys, is like 30% of you have tickets already. And 30% of you say you're going to buy tickets, but haven't bought them yet. So at this point, I don't believe you. So you need to prove me wrong and go buy those Bitcoin conference tickets. All right. And with that, enjoy your evening, guys. Great talking to you today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Oh.